Throw some colors on the screen and paint me black and white. I wanna see a thief in a gunfight or a heroine wounded in love. You can keep her lighted by an old flame left to frame, so I can read the feeling on her face, half in shadow, and know I felt that too. In danger and in love, you've got the dreams I was dreaming of. I've got 2 hours to pretend, so I'll watch a movie with a friend. Time's running sideways, and reality's gotta meet me halfway, so I'll meet it here again. Here's the Trading Movies Podcast with friends.
Hello everyone, today I'm talking to Stephanie Edd, who is a writer, content producer, and Marxist. Her noir detective novel, The Clear Case, is available in paperback and ebook. You can find all her social media platforms, her Film Noir Database, and other content on StephanieEdd.com. That's StephanieEdd.com. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I've been following, Stephanie and I have been mutuals, I guess is the term. I need to learn all the lingo. For a while, because she makes great content on TikTok around just, films, a lot of stuff I've noticed, not just like movies and stuff. But one thing in particular, I'm kind of a bit of a obsessive dweeb about, like, when people follow me or if I'm mutual. So I checked out her link. I noticed she has the film, also in the intro, the Film Noir Database, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a database, an Airtable of film noir. And with over 150 films, I'm reading off her website, it includes 2 full gallery views of more than 150 films, along with linked records to the directors, screenwriters, and actors. Almost every record includes a link to a site where you can watch the film for free, so definitely get on that because there are so many good film noirs. But one thing I've always been curious about, because I don't know if I have a good definition of this, because I have a list on my letterbox called Noirs Ranked. Now, let me see if I can actually give some dead air while I pull this up, because Letterboxd is always I have probably either, if you want to see the work of an insane man, do go on my Letterboxd list, because there's a lot of insane lists on here. Some of them are pretty good, but my Noirs Ranked, I exclude some stuff just on vibes. So I have Noirs Ranked, and I guess the open question was weird one's not listed that I don't consider noir, and this will lead into the question. Vertigo, mystery instead of noir. Sunset Boulevard, which I think is more of a universal horror. I have my little Dracula, Frankenstein set. Leave Her to Heaven, which Stephanie and I will probably argue about in this episode. Unclassifiable. Possessed, horror. The Hitchhiker, horror. Spiral Staircase, horror. Caged, prison movie. Casablanca, which I'm wearing my shirt today. Romance. The Big Sleep, romance. And The Red House, horror. So, I guess, Stephanie, what is a film noir?
A film noir, first of all, I think of it very much like an umbrella, and that a film noir can be a film noir and something else. So there are films noir that are romances. There are films noir that intersect with horror themes. There are films noir that are comedies. Like, film noir is very much based in themes, traditions, tropes, and it can be very wishy-washy and, shades of gray. So it really, like, a lot of those ones that you just mentioned, I'm like, they are film noir, but they're also other things. So it's like they're both. So like Sunset Boulevard is a great example. Sunset Boulevard, I think, is very much a film noir, but it also is embracing the German expressionist horror roots of film noir. And I think maybe that's a place that we can start, where we can start in terms of what started film noir, where did film noir come from? How did it come to exist? And film noir is basically the intersection of German expressionist horror and hard-boiled crime fiction. So it's basically taking a lot of these themes around crime and criminality, the psychology of crime, the economic drive behind crime, and then also very much psychological horror. Like if you look at German Expressionism, the kind of horror that they're dealing with is simulacra. It's very existential of what is reality? Am I in control of myself? Like there are a lot of psychiatric themes and psychological themes around, am I interpreting reality correctly? You know, because in a sense, reality is an illusion that helps us make sense of the universe. It's like so much of what we engage with is not real. And that's, I feel like, why solipsism exists, where it's like the only thing that I know for sure is that I exist. And I feel like film noir, by way of German Expressionism, is really exploring those themes. So Sunset Boulevard is a great example because Norma Desmond is a Dracula. You know, it's like she has this very surreal, almost anti-reality that is also dominating and consuming and possessive, like a monster, you know, like a vampire. The way that she is possessive of Joe. There's the shot where he finally submits and kisses her, and the way that her like clawed hand embraces the back of his head is very much in the horror tradition. And so a lot of those themes come into play in film noir, but really I find like what it boils down to is it dealing with psychological themes, like the psychological crisis of either our material conditions or some kind of terror? Is it dealing with crime in terms of the motivations behind crime being primarily economic or self-interested, whereas a lot of the crime, and we'll get into this when we talk about Undercurrent, in like gothic horror is around depravity, and that's usually has a lot of sex in it. So film noir is very much about the existential and psychological crisis of our real material conditions, our inability to process reality accurately, and identity crisis. So basically, who am I? Who am I if I don't achieve this goal? Who am I if I lose this person? Who am I if my circumstances change? Who am I if I give up these patterns that fail every single time? So it's really around that. It's very much psychology, hard-boiled crime, and horror from a simulacra, a reality existential crisis point of view. So there's lots of like great intersections. There's a movie called Black Friday from 1940 that I think is like the perfect film to see the transition from German expressionist horror to film noir. And Boris Karloff plays this neurologist who decides to put into practice his absurd mad science theory about replacing part of the human brain with someone else's brain, and then they're okay. And he does it with his buddy, who's a professor. He replaces part of his brain with part of the brain of a criminal who recently died. And then Boris Karloff starts to see that his friend is starting to remember things, or his personality is changing a little bit, and he thinks, and this is the noir shift, ooh, that criminal died before he could reveal where his secret stash is. He socked away some money somewhere. Now maybe if I can bring out this personality, I can get that money. And so he's infected with what J.R.R. Tolkien called dragon sickness. And that's a thing that will often change a film noir from whatever base genre it is into a film noir, because someone gets corrupted by greed. And so that's kind of what shifted that movie, Black Friday, from just being a horror movie into also having a lot of noir themes. And so you see that germinating and starting to transition. And then you get a movie called Stranger on the Third Floor from 1941, which includes the iconic noir type character Peter Lorre, who is obviously a German expressionist actor. He was in M, which is an extremely important proto-noir having to do with crime and the way that society deals with crime.
And Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say Casablanca is much more of a melodrama. I would not categorize Casablanca as a film noir, because there really isn't this sort of psychological component. It's very much all about matters of the heart, the heartbreak of war. really. So it's like I very much consider it, a rebel story and a romance. But it's like there are elements that are missing around the psychological crisis. It's very much a movie about the heart. So it's like if a movie's about very much about emotion in the heart, then it's leaning more toward a melodrama. Whereas if it's very much in the head, then it is leaning more toward film noir.
I think I might,
yeah.
based on that, I might go Casablanca noir, because I think like I just watched
It's on the line.
It's on the line, yeah. I just watched it a week or two ago. It's now added to my list. I hadn't seen it probably and just sat down and watched it in like 10, 15 years. But it's definitely on like if I just need like a cheer-up movie because it's just so well made. I think it's just that and like Mission Impossibles and stuff. But the thing I noticed on this was I think his psychological battle of like almost should I be an activist? Like should I fight fascism? Like kind of thing. Like, and I think that element of it I noticed more. I mean, definitely the romance is like the piece of it.
Yes.
And it's, I don't think he makes the choice to, it's, I don't want to be crass, but it's sort of like, men will do anything to, impress a woman type thing of like, he's like, all right, I'm going to, even shoot this German general, which shout out,
Yeah.
Whenever you can, have a chance to pop a Nazi general, do it, allegedly. But, yeah, I think it's all great. I agree with you. I think I would definitely like probably get into the mindset of like a film is like one thing primarily, not even like primarily. Like it obviously can be like multiple, like a noir. Like to your point about like it becomes a noir and it's also these other things. But yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Of like, especially as you said, like when you're talking about greed and relating to material interests, because I think like a lot of the reasons I was when I was trying to like think of what my definition of noir is, I realized that like I was kind of on the film gris, I guess it's called, the gray film for the audience of like, according to Wikipedia, it's a type of film noir which categorizes a unique series of films that were released between 47 and 51, and they offer, quote, a leftist criticism of society in general and of capitalism in particular. And these would be movies like Body and Soul, They Live by Night, The Asphalt Jungle, Night in the City, which is, one of the ones we watched for the episode. He Ran All the Way, a bunch of John Garfield stuff in there. I think there's another, goodness, I can't remember the other one. Sometimes like Big House USA, which I think is a little bit later. But these very sort of like economically based noirs. I think the other thing is, I think some of it for me is like I was a classics major at my first college for 3 years, and so I did like a lot of Euripides, Aeschylus, like Iliad, the Odyssey, all that. One of the things I loved about those works is like they just understood the concept of like a cursed existence really well. They understood generational trauma, and they understood like epigenetic trauma and just like a cursed existence. So I always felt like, in a way that I don't know if I still feel this way, but I always felt like film noirs in particular, like Richard Widmark's character in the movie we watched, Night in the City, like the poor fella, I love him so much just because he seems like the most cursed guy on the planet, just in terms of just like, it's never like, as a minute into the movie, I knew this is going to go terrible for him. There's no way this has any semblance of a happy ending for him. And I thought about that like with like Oedipus, or like, a lot of the times I don't know if they do this in the Oedipus trilogy, but like the Oresteia or whatever, but they, these Greek, the chorus will come on, or like, these things will come on. It's like, this guy's cursed. He's going to die. He's going to be fucked up. And then you're just going to watch it happen. And I feel like some of my favorite noirs, this movie and some of those other ones, He Ran All the Way with John Garfield, I really love. Also, shout out Shelley Winters in that, who's a queen. It's just like, there's something about it that's so... But then as I started watching more and more movies, Douglas Sirk, when you talked about Casablanca as melodrama, like obviously one of the kings of melodrama, he was very, very influenced via both Bertolt Brecht and also directly of these old Greek things, as was like, there was just sort of a latent thing around the time with like Eugene O'Neill. One of the episodes I just released for the pod was we did Morning Becomes Electra, which is an adaptation of the Oresteia play cycle. So yeah, it's always like a Greek thing, but I think probably the reason I leaned even, personal politics aside, although they definitely played a part of that, leftist to leftist, was just like, it was almost like film noirs, my favorite ones, like Night in the City, seemed to like combine, to your point. I think it's a great definition of like, they took this ancient Greek stuff of like personal psychological issues, Greek trauma, like personal trauma, and also had like a class consciousness to them of like, it's almost like the environment is cursing you as well.
Yes.
Which, as someone who grew up in a very poor town in East Tennessee, I was telling Stephanie before just randomly, we were just talking about random things. Like, I graduated with at least one kid who was actually illiterate. It was just like, and he was like one of the better, he did better at the school than many of the kids that I went to school with who didn't graduate or whatever. It's a small 270 kids. So like, East Tennessee is a very environmentally cursed place for many reasons. And a lot of it is just due to just poverty. And, it's like, there's that whole spooky thing of like, people want to like, anthropomorphize Appalachia and say like, oh, it's like, there's demons and there's monsters. It's really just poverty. It's just like, just cycles and cycles and cycles of just active class warfare of like, rich people literally dumping chemicals or like, doing eminent domain and stripping people of land and just not giving them social services. I don't know. I think that's probably, just to compliment you, I think one of the better definitions I've heard, part of it of just like, it's a psychological, but also something related to greed. And would you say it's like a class consciousness?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons I think I have always loved noir so much as a Marxist, is because it also, it thematically and trope wise and point of view are very critical of institutions, of hierarchy, of authority, of exploitative economics, of racism, of oppression in general, and just domination. Like, film noir, it like is based on, in terms of like, if you look at like the tradition of hard-boiled fiction, like Dashiell Hammett was very much a leftist, and he was also the only really of the detective writers who was himself a detective. Like, he worked for the Pinkerton agency, so he was in it and saw it. And then, when you read Red Harvest, it really is about like the crisis of like, these guys hired these goons to strike break, and now the goons are now occupying the place. That's what happens. That's what happens when the bourgeoisie turn to a criminal element to solve their problems. It's like, you can't, because you're not operating on the same social contract. And that's another thing that film noir is all about, is about the negotiation of social contracts. What happens when you violate the social contract? What happens when you go into an environment not realizing that the social contract is different from the one that you're used to, and that you're not operating on the same one? So it's like, there are so many different elements at play. And I also just want to throw out that, like, these definitions, like trying to define film noir or categorize film noir or categorize neo-noir or, get into this compartmentalization is really, I think, should only be for fun. Like, everybody out there, this should only be for fun. Don't fight over what is a film noir.
Friendly fight.
Yeah, this is all supposed to be for the sake of parsing out the meaning of these pieces and contextualizing and understanding them and relating them together so that we can use these to better understand our own real world. Like, that is, I think, the biggest gift of film noir, is it gives us these frameworks, it gives us these stories that we can use to analyze. Like, you talk about Fabian as being cursed, and it's like, what is the curse? The curse is being an American white man. He's cursed with manifest destiny. He's cursed with American exceptionalism. And he, what are these characters cursed with? I think is very much often systems of oppression, and the culture that they're born into, the economy that they're born into, the gender that they're born into. I feel like patriarchy is like often a huge theme in film noir. Like, both of these movies that we're going to discuss, I think, really get into that and into all these major themes. And that's why I think these two movies are so great, because I feel like they give us like two very different sides of film noir. Like, I'm sure people would argue with me about Undercurrent being a film noir, and that is one that I will fight. I will fight you.
Well, that's a good segue. So Stephanie for the episode picked Undercurrent. which I was appreciative of because I love Katharine Hepburn. I mean, that's just just flat out. I mean, she's great. But I don't think I had seen her in a film noir. And
it's her only film noir.
Okay.
She was only in this one. That was it. And Vincent Minnelli only ever directed the one film noir also.
That was also weird. Yeah, Vicente.
Yeah.
Vincent or Vincent Minnelli. I always call him Vicente Minnelli.
I'm probably wrong, but whatever. He doesn't mind.
It's spelled Vincente. I always say Vicente, so yeah.
It's probably Vicente.
He's it says
Minnelli.
Vincent. It says Vincent on the Wikipedia, so we'll go with that. He was born Lester Anthony Minnelli. How about that?
Oh,
famously, Liza Minnelli's dad. Shout out Liza, a queen. We love her. Big fan. My favorite character on Arrested Development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just absolutely one of the funniest characters of all time. But yeah, so this was he did a lot of musicals, and you know that was like his American in Paris, one of his famous ones. I can't remember the one that I watched that he did that was really good. I haven't seen as many musicals for no reason. My dad loved classic movies, but was not a big musical guy, so we didn't end up watching a ton of them. So I have a lot of catching up to do. But Undercurrent. Yeah, so directed by the only Vincent Minnelli's his only film noir and Katharine Hepburn's only film noir. Why did you pick this one? So why are you so passionate about Undercurrent? Why is this a film noir?
Oh yeah, this is a film noir because it's very much about psychological crisis and identity crisis. And I also think it's really great because it's a fun sort of subgenre, and it's like on the line. It has so many themes of a gothic melodrama, and I feel like that is a side of film noir that is very feminine and is also, because I think very feminine, something that people argue about, and they kind of struggle with a film noir that has a woman protagonist and has these gothic themes. Whereas you have like a movie like Rebecca that is very much a gothic melodrama. And so people kind of get into this argument about what it is. And I wanted to pick this movie because it is a very unusual character for Katharine Hepburn and a misunderstood character. People will be like, she's playing a weak woman. And it's like, she's not playing a weak woman. She's playing a sweetheart. Like, Anne is sweet. Like, she should be Anne with an E, like Anne of Green Gables, really. Like, she's very much, she is a naive and submissive character who is just full of excitement and curiosity and energy. And because she's been sheltered and protected by a good father, an intellectual father who taught her to be an intellectual, but also is a romantic. Like, he is encouraging her to get involved with Alan and is like, this guy is obviously into you, and that's cool, and that's great. He's wonderful and you're wonderful. And he's very supportive and very encouraging of her emotional life and of her romantic life. So she's lived in this great, wonderful, safe place. And that is often what happens with these types of women protagonists. And then they get thrust into a noir plot. They get thrust into a situation that isn't what it seems. And the classic melodrama sort of setup of like being swept off your feet by this wealthy, sophisticated, handsome, classy man. And then he takes you to his big, scary mansion in the middle of nowhere. Right. And then you start to discover that he is very possessive, that he's very obsessive, and he's secretive. And then there are family secrets. And so these are all very much gothic themes. But when you get under the surface, like, the motivation behind Alan is not depravity. It is greed and insecurity. So we find out that his invention that won the war, the Garraway distance control, this technology that he released and is the source of all of his power and his identity, was stolen. He murdered the inventor and stole the plans and has been riding high on them, and that's his identity. And his brother, Michael, when he shows up, played by Robert Mitchum, is just like, you are insecure. Like, that's what it is. You have this insecurity inside, and this insatiable greed. And like that is very much the shift of it. I think that shifts it into a film noir. It is very much an identity crisis. It's a power crisis. It's a loneliness crisis. It's possessive. And then you have our protagonist who is performing the role of amateur sleuth. That is often what really kind of separates this from the melodrama, as opposed to the woman protagonist just sort of being terrorized the whole time and kind of stumbling into the solutions almost, you know? The protagonist of a gothic noir is a detective. Like, she is curious, and it is through her own sort of rebellion against her environment, her natural, innate rebellion, that reveals these first clues. And that happens in Undercurrent at the dinner party. So she goes and she gets the book, and she comes back and she feels bad for the congressman from Iowa, I think it is, who's sat in the middle of the table by the door. She feels bad for him because the assistant who's planning the whole thing is like, he's not important, and she feels bad about that. So she swaps his place with the judge who's supposed to be sitting at her right. And it is that little bit of rebellion, that little bit of conflict, of chaos, where she decides to switch these two guys, is what sets up, it delays the conversation that she has with the judge until Alan can witness it. And because he witnesses it, that's when he witnesses her quoting the Stevenson poem. And his reaction to that Stevenson poem is the first clue. It's the first sort of chink in the armor. It's the first thing that really like gets her, of being like, why is he so upset about this? Like, and it's the first time that Alan really like flies off the handle, and he shows her like the crazy eyes for the first time, and she sees the intensity of this, and it absolutely ignites the amateur sleuth inside her. It opens her detective's eye, as I kind of like to say, and she cannot help but start to investigate Michael. And then she goes on a Laura journey. Like, she starts, like, you know, Lieutenant McPherson and Laura, investigating her murder, starts to fall in love with her. And that's exactly what happens to Anne as she's trying to investigate what
that's a great
perhaps
connection,
isn't, perhaps, you know, it may perhaps be a murder, especially when she goes and meets that other woman. I'm blanking on her name now. The woman that Alan was trying to replace with
Lucy?
Anne.
Is it Marjorie Mann?
Something like that. But yeah, and then, you know, it's so funny. We were just talking about Pygmalion. That's what Alan does to Anne. And the Pygmalion theme is a big theme in noir, I think also because it's a big theme in Hollywood, which is like speaking to these Greek tragedies or these Greek myths. Like, Pygmalion was a sculptor who sculptured this magnificent statue of a woman, Galatea. And then because it's so perfect, she comes to life. And that was something that happened in Hollywood a lot. Like, Howard Hawks was really big on, you know, creating women. Like, he created Lauren Bacall, changed her name, sent her to voice training to drop her voice an octave, did all of these big changes to her to make her his creation. And then when she started getting involved with Humphrey Bogart, was like insanely jealous. And so it's like the Pygmalion theme was a huge theme in Hollywood at the time, of these men crafting women to meet their fantasies, and then those fantasies coming to life. But then in reality, like, because she's alive and an individual person, not complying with his wishes. And that is very much what happened in Undercurrent, is that Alan saw the raw materials of Anne as being like this other woman that he was in love with and could not possess, which is another huge theme in film noir, of men breaking down and being unable to cope with their inability to own a woman. And that is that is what Alan is dealing with this other woman who loves his brother, and now Anne. So he revised her in his image with the glow up. He took her to get a glow up after he exposed her in her most dowdy form to all of his friends on purpose, so that they would know he was Pygmalion. And that it ends up being part of the investigation that Anne has to come to terms with as she's investigating this. It doesn't turn out that she's just investigating a murder. She's also investigating all these layers of crimes of which she's a victim. So there are so many themes at play, and that is one of the things where that makes a film noir. Is like you almost like start making a laundry list of almost like a check, being like, there's the theme, there's the trope, there's this, there's that. Like when I released my novel, The Clear Case, I made a bunch of videos for TikTok talking about my many favorite films noir, and one of the things that I did was list out a bunch of tropes in each movie that were common to the film noir genre. Like I said, a man reacting to his inability to own a woman, the lady amateur sleuth, these psychological crises, this greed, the Laura themes, like all of these different tropes that can kind of help you identify a film noir. And then all of those tropes also are important, and I like them because they allow us to analyze our material realities. So we can talk about like the curse of patriarchy in this movie, and like the curse of American exceptionalism and manifest destiny on men. Even like both of these movies that we're going to talk about very much get into that, of being like, the pressure, the unbearable pressure of white maleness, because there is this expectation. Like, I'm sure like a lot of people will be like, oh my God, Stephanie, are you talking about the oppression of white men? But I'm like, no, it's actually really important that we talk about this, because it is this oppression that weaponizes white men against other people. Like this, the burden on Alan Galloway is what drives him to murder. He murders people and then tries to murder Anne. So it's like it turns them into agents of the system, committing acts of violence to protect and benefit the system. So it's like Alan takes total control of this piece of technology that will be critical in the war, which the system prefers because the guy who invented it was an immigrant. America doesn't want immigrants to invent things that America uses to win wars. That's not, they want the tall, handsome, white, Alan Garraway. That's who they want. And so they pressure that guy. They put him in a position, in a class position, as a kind of, petty bourgeois. Like, he's a bourgeois character. He's a capitalist. He's a business owner. He's of a certain class. He is generational wealth, and he's supposed to perform all of these things. But he's also missing a lot of elements that he sees in his brother, which are like charisma, Like there's this really small, like the line almost gets thrown away when they're, waiting for the elevator and they overhear the two women talking about Anne's reveal, like talking about Alan and Anne, like when they got married, and talking about how she couldn't have looked dowdier, and that is what makes Anne unable to deny that she got the Pygmalion treatment. But as they're getting on to the elevator, like one of them says like, oh, he's so attractive, and the other one is like, he doesn't wear well. And like that's the thing, and that is like another noir theme of like what's underneath doesn't match the surface. So it's sort of like on the surface and at the very beginning of meeting Alan Garraway, you think that he's so attractive. You think he's so great and so charismatic and so charming. But then we get all these examples of how he's not. Like at the dinner party, when he tries to say something to the judge, he asks him this totally boring question that the judge answers and then doesn't make an effort to contribute to the conversation after that. And it's showing us how this guy lacks the social skills, lacks the charisma that his brother has, and then that creates this masculine patriarchal jealousy. And like masculine jealousy is another huge theme in film noir. And so it's like when we understand the ways that white men in America are abused and cursed by the patriarchy, to use your word, we understand how they are then weaponized and why they turn to crime and why they turn to violence. And it's like if we can analyze that, then that helps us to dismantle those systems, because it's like this is not good for you. You know, like it's not good for anyone to put this absurd, unattainable standard over white men and demand that they act like a man when we really don't tell them exactly what that means, you know, or when we do tell them what it means, it's completely impossible to attain. So, you know, that this movie offers us so many opportunities to analyze the genre of film noir and its intersection with gothic melodrama, and also conduct a lot of really great analysis of patriarchy and capitalist white supremacist patriarchy specifically.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's definitely a thing, like, you know, not just as like a, you know, woe is me, pity me type of person, but like any type of alienation is bad. And that is like the way that white dudes do get alienated. It's like, yeah, there is like the expectation of like, you know, you should do this, and like you can just look at, you know, Harry Fabian and Night in the City, and it's just like, yeah, he's destroyed by the pressure when he really shouldn't be. And you know, it's also alienating even from a practical standpoint as like as a, you know, if you want to see change as like and see more class consciousness, it's like, well, the reasons, part of the way that people betray their class as white dudes is they have the manifest destiny American exceptionalism white dude thing, and it alienates you from your fellow people. But also just in terms of explaining society, you know, years ago, I can't remember if I was told this or I just kind of figured it out. You know, I'm not making a novel discovery here, but my rule of thumb personally is like, if something is going to be legal or illegal in the future in terms of like an industry or something, it's like, are rich white guys making money from it? And I used to argue, you know, I remember like talking with people as like marijuana was starting to get legalized, and you know, for years I was like, it's not going to be legal, or like it's not going to, you know, be a thing. But then once like rich white guys started like investing in it and making money, it's like, oh, this is going to be legalized because the right people are making money from it. To your point about the immigrant, it's not that, you know, and that's also that's been a big thing as they've legalized it, so to speak. You know, you're in California, right? One of the primary ones. Prior to the legalization, it was a lot of people in who are not rich white dudes doing it, but the actual gains that have gone to that are not the people that we jailed for 30 or 40 years. I mean, if you looked at it from a sociologist from an outside, and many have, it's like, you would have to say it's an accurate statement to say that while black and brown people were making money from marijuana, primarily, who were the primary earners of it, like, as, you know, like, you know, lower level dealers or like whatever else, or for like 50, 60 years, it was not legalized. But then as soon as white people, rich white dudes became interested in it, now it's legalized. And it's like, you can say it doesn't, you know, there was no intention to be racist with it or whatever, which I don't believe. But like, you can say that as like a, you know, there's ostensibly no thing. But like, if you looked at it from the outside, it's like, yeah, the people who have gotten the gains since the legalization has been the same people who make the gains from the heavy weapons industry, from copper mining, from McDonald's, from, you know, buying up houses as private equity people. It's the same. It's the same people, and that you can say that with like sports gambling now getting legalized as well. Used to be like, you know, bookies on the street or like whatever, but it's probably going to be here to stay because now there's so much money tied in it from private equity and all the quote unquote right people. Yeah.
See, that's the thing. It's like you were saying, like, oh, there's like no intent for it to be racist or whatever. But the thing you have to remember about capitalism and the systems that we have is that they're very much automated, and automations don't require intent. So these systems are
violence, right?
They're just operating, and we know that capitalism will appropriate anything that threatens it, and like that is kind of like in this story, like, you know, an agent of capitalism appropriated the distance control, you know, rather than you know, allowing this immigrant to get credit, you know. And it's funny you talk about marijuana. I remember I went to at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. Some people out there who like the Vampire Chronicles, that's where Lestat had his big concert, was at the Cow Palace in the Vampire Lestat. It's a huge, you know, go buy cows giant place, and they had a
Sacramento Kings arena for the basketball team, right? It's their home arena.
No, it's in Sacramento. It's in San Francisco. I'm sorry.
The Cow Palace is in San Francisco.
The Cow Palace is in San Francisco. And
okay. My
it's
bad.
huge. And this was like, God, this must have been like 10, 12 years ago. Like right when medical and stuff when medical got legalized, what they did is they had a big, like, they called it HempCon. And you basically go in there and it was just like hundreds of tables and vendors of, farms and vape pen companies and weird dab companies and all sorts of different stuff. And there were so many companies there, like small companies that were all venture capital, and all of these obvious, like, just the worst white scumbag hustlers that you could think of. Like, they're very, like, it was a room full of Harry Fabians. It's like Harry
The bad
Fabian
guys
would...
from Sallow. Yeah.
It's like, Harry Fabian would definitely be like, oh my God, I got this amazing deal with this company that's going to make concentrates, and they use honeydew melon terpenes, and everyone's going to go crazy for these pens. And it's like that. It's like where it leans into this hustle thing. And as things get more popular amongst white people, that's when capitalism absorbs it into this system, where it's like before... Yeah. The illegality of marijuana was just a way for the system to enslave people, brown people. Basically, like, we are going to use them to enslave black and brown people in prisons. That was just a tool of it. But then eventually too many white people were smoking weed. And so then they had to find a way to appropriate it. And they did that by using medical as a wedge. Like, they used to be like, oh, well, all these poor old white people with cancer, like, they're smoking marijuana, they're vaping marijuana so that they can eat and they don't throw up all the time. Aw, isn't that so sad? Cancer patients. They basically, like, the capitalists basically used cancer patients in order to take control of marijuana as an industry and appropriate it for white supremacist capitalism. And it's like no one did that with the conscious intent of, I'm going to screw over all of these brown people who are growing weed and in the hills or whatever. And like, it wasn't. It was just self-interest. And that's how they do it with the Harry Fabians of the world, as they program these Harry Fabians with this desperate need to be somebody. And being somebody means being economically successful under capitalism. So he's desperately seeking becoming a person and a life of ease and plenty, as he's constantly saying. And that's what it is. And by programming him with this desperate need to be exceptional and to manifest his destiny, he acts as an agent of the system, hurting the people around him. So he ends up hurting immigrants, right? He ends up hurting women, and doing damage to poor people, like damaging, the struggling community. Because he's not like hanging out amongst the rich, like the bar where he meets Helen, like is a total crap hole. Like it's not. It's like he's not in, an opulent environment. He's among the poor. And his efforts help keep the poor poor. And you mentioned he ran all the way. He ran all the way is a great example of how the system engineers these antisocial personalities, these sociopathic, psychopathic personalities amongst the poor, these low-level predators. It activates them so that they are policing the working class, that they are controlling and oppressing the working class on behalf of the status quo. That's like the purpose that poor white men serve, is to help keep their peers underfoot. And that's one of the reasons, like, if you look at like early 20th century, like late 19th century labor organizing, like in California, there was like the these farm workers that were like Japanese, they finally they struck and they organized and they had all the success and they were about to be welcomed into the union, and it would have been huge for labor organizing in California. But then all the white people in the union were like, no, we have to be segregated, and they ruined the whole thing. And so it's like white people in labor organizing are constantly sabotaging labor, just snatching victory, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, basically, because they won't give up their racial status. And men do this all the time too, where it's like they will sacrifice class advancement, they will sacrifice labor solidarity, class solidarity in order to maintain their gender privilege. So that's basically how it works, is that you're programming people and giving them just a little bit of privilege so that they will abandon their peers for a chance to get just a little bit more, a chance to take a step up on the hierarchy and assume a role of authority and dominance, which assuages their feelings of insecurity and lack of safety and lack of identity. And that is such a film noir theme of identity, of who am I? I want to be somebody,
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, it's a good, last night, we did, I do movie night every Friday with my boys. We just 4 or 5 of us, and we just switch off movie picks. So one of the movies that my buddy picked last night, he had been, the last one he had picked a couple weeks ago was Teorema, which I did a video about, and we kind of had skipped movie night for a bit, which is a Pasolini movie about just sort of like the fundamental spiritual alienation of the upper class. And so he's like, he's also a big leftist socialist, so he's like, I'm gonna pick another Pasolini movie. So we watched Porcile, or Pigsty. I don't know if you've seen that Pasolini. Have you seen much Pasolini, like a Sallow or any of that? Steph, that's gonna go on my Rex for you when we do the end of the episode. He is the most. There is no one, I don't think, any director that has hated rich people as much as Pasolini. Now, I don't think any, even like Jules Dawson, who got blacklisted for this, Cy Enfield, who I think got blacklisted for Try and Get Me. Even John Ford has a lot of it, and all the great film noir directors and people in I think Dalton Trumbo, you could say, was Spartacus as a writer. Really, he hated him some rich people, but Pasolini with Pigsty, it's like such a bizarre movie because it's 2 stories where one is basically sort of an allegory of a poor guy who's so desperately hungry that he's basically resorting to like just violent cannibalism, going through this like desert. And the other story is just basically a German guy who literally dresses and looks like Hitler. And then another guy, it's just like these upper class people just kind of hanging out in a house. And they're just like talking about just like, they just sort of casually mention, it's like, oh yeah, we control the bread and all the cannons and like all this and all everything. And like, even though you're watching one half of the guy who's like eating people and killing people, you have so much more empathy, and Pasolini treats him with so much more empathy than the rich people who he's just utter contempt and utter alienation and utter spiritual depravity that it's. Yeah, I don't know if he ever did a film noir. I need to check out more of his early stuff, but it was a interesting watch in light of also coming on watching 2 very economically driven noirs, because I think that was my take on. It wasn't like Night in the City is obviously one of the. It's like very economically, it's like so devastating, but Undercurrent, I really enjoyed it. Now, to me, when you said it was it's very much a noir, I agree with you, because I think I'm coming around to your definition of like especially like it can be something that makes it a noir. And I think the investigation thing I hadn't considered, but absolutely, while you were talking, I was writing down a little a little note to just like as maybe a little genre of movies to keep track about, with like Undercurrent, The Snake Pit, Now Voyager, and The Heiress, where it's like kind of like feels like these movies are all like kind of like like lady protagonists. They're kind of like empowering in a way. Like I thought I was like devastated for Hepburn's character, but I also really appreciated that she got like not a great ending, but a decent ending. And I think like it was like it came around. But what she had to go through, I felt so bad for, because like honestly, the person she reminds me the most of as an actress and as a persona in all these movies is my grandma. Because my grandma was, she went to Bryn Mawr in the 40s. She was a geologist. She graduated pretty early to get a bachelor's degree as a lady. And she married my grandpa, who was also a geologist, and together they basically did geology things, and they had this great, they definitely threw some coffee at each other once or twice because they were old Jewish people, that's just of the generation. But they did this, it almost is like this movie was if my grandma, because she was more upper class than my grandpa. She my great grandpa, her dad had worked with their League of Nations. He was in the health department. He was she was born in Switzerland and spent her beginning of her life there. This movie was almost if she it was just there but for the grace of God go her, in terms of she could have, it seemed she, because Hepburn's this, she's a chemist or whatever. She's doing these experiments at the beginning of the movie. I can't remember what her actual thing is, but she's very, much as Hepburn
her
does.
Father invented, he basically discovered a new chemical. That would, be extremely useful. I forget exactly what it's supposed to be. It's some unobtainium type theme. And she's basically kind of she's his kind of his lab assistant, or she keeps the lab clean. So she's very much cleaning up the lab and assisting him in that capacity. So she's she is fulfilling a role that a lot of women at the time did for scientific men, which is sort of have a basic understanding of how it works, but not enough of an expertise to threaten his ego, enough expertise to be a comfort and to be able to listen to him complain about the problems that he's encountering and the struggling that he's having, the ability to maybe proof his work, maybe have a good idea occasionally that he can steal, in a way, she's she's agentic AI for him almost. That is the role that women serve for these types of scientific figures of where she's not really being trained to be his equal, but is, doing all the things that he doesn't want to do, clean the lab.
The way Hepburn plays it, I think it's just also I think she was very sympathetic, probably personally, to all these characters, just given who she was as a person and such a, such an ardent feminist herself, and such a driven, focused on her career,
she was a bulldozer. She was a real bulldozer.
She was a bulldozer.
And she was that with Manelli on the production of this film, actually. He was stressed, she was so strong. And she talked about, she was I know things aren't going to go great if I could push the director around. Sure, she was kind of but they got it together eventually. But yeah, she was very much a bulldozer. And I think that actually makes this character really interesting and kind of a real departure, is that even though in terms of the way she expresses herself and the way that she acts is very very Jo Marsh, which was her first famous role, right, and very Katharine Hepburn, where she's very outspoken, she's funny, she's gregarious, that she's high-spirited, she has a strong will, she won't submit to this boring guy who's trying to marry her at the beginning, right? She's on a path to marry a boring professor and perform the role that I was just describing for him, to be the ideal wife for a real scientist. But she's not interested in that, and she's very much I'm fine being an old maid, whatever. But the thing that really shifts it and that makes her character so different is this undercurrent of humility, where she doesn't have a lot of confidence in herself as a feminine entity. So it's she doesn't see herself as beautiful, and she also just doesn't see herself as on the same level as the men she admires. So it's her father invites her over to look at some blueprints, and she's I don't understand that, which is not a thing that Katharine Hepburn would ever say. She'd be oh, interesting. She would just look at she would never say something self-deprecating. But Anne does. Anne is self-deprecating, Anne is humble, Anne is submissive, and doesn't question the very early, weird, possessive things that Alan says. Who do you belong to? you're mine. Like, he's very, very possessive, which is, as we come to find out, very much in conflict with Anne's sense of impermanence, and that we never really own anything. Like, that's why she connects so much with that Stevenson poem. And that also terrifies Alan, because he's the opposite.
Yeah.
Mine, my wife, mine, you're mine. If you won't stay with me, then I have to kill you. Like, that level of possessiveness. But she doesn't clock that initially, because she's overwhelmed by love and the promise of ascension and the validation of an agent of the system. To be like, the patriarch has said that I'm good enough. I am woman enough. He has validated me as a woman, and thus I'm happy. But because it's a house of cards and it's simulacra, if she can't deny it, and she does things that are surprising for like a character that in this kind of Gothic storyline, that I think is what separates it from the Gothic storyline, is that she's submissive, but she's not a doormat. And that scene when she's at the ranch at night and Alan shows up and starts yelling at her, she's just like, I understand that you didn't want me to be here, but it's absurd that you left work. You left Seattle where you were doing your work to come here and yell at me and shout at me like a criminal. Like, she's just like, what, your behavior is absurd and we have to deal with this. She's just like, clearly something's wrong here. This is not right. And we have to solve it. We have to solve this mystery. We have to solve this problem and set it right. Unfortunately, it's like there is no solving it, because Alan is corrupted. He's a murderer. He's been corrupted by the dragon sickness. He's been corrupted by his own toxic masculinity, and there is no saving him. And that is like often a consequence of the Hays Code, but that is also very much the tradition in hard-boiled literature, which was not restrained by that, in that sense. But it's like he could not survive. Like, he is at odds with nature, for instance, and they established that really early when the dog doesn't like him, right? The dogs don't like him. He's killed by a horse, his brother's horse, and it's because he has violated the laws of nature. He is unnatural. And like that also brings in all of these German expressionist themes. There is a German expressionist movie called The Golem that is this almost Jewish fairy tale about like this ghetto that's being oppressed by the king, and this rabbi mystic manufactures a golem to save them. And of course the golem is in conflict with nature, so it cannot protect them. It ends up destroying them, right? And like that is what Alan is. He is his own golem, or capitalism's golem, and he is at odds with nature, and nature is stronger than the constructions of man, and thus is doomed. And that's why he's not killed by Anne, he's killed by Michael's horse. And it's just so much fun that there's so much of that, right? Like, there's just so much of that. They're just like, look at all of these ancient themes, look at all these various ways of looking at this that lean into your classics education. It's so great, so fun.
It struck me as like as a real as a tragedy of a woman encouraged the wrong way, or not at all, really, of just like, and also it's like, it was interesting in light of like, there's like the whole, I think probably everybody goes through this with their parents on some level. Like, if you, like, depending on, what type of relationship people have with their parents, like, even everybody's parents messes with them in some way, whether it's like super severe or otherwise. But like, even this is even somewhat of the tragedy of like well-intentions on the father's part, or the tragedy of good intentions, because like he's trying to reasonably probably set her up, because that's her role in society, like not defending it, but like he's trying to set her up for this thing and saying like, here's this guy, blah blah blah, but really he just misunderstands her, I think, as a person. And the undercurrent, when you're talking about like the undercurrent of humility, the undercurrent that I got from like her character was sort of like this: she didn't want him, she realizes that she wants to desire for agency and freedom, I think. And so like her attraction to Mitchum, as much as I think like it's interesting in the same way that the way you pointed out, like Laura is interesting as like this other person. I think her attraction to him is like her attraction to freedom. Like, I think she realizes within maybe 5 minutes. And ladies, DM me if you want like a third party opinion on dudes, because I can call them out pretty quickly. But like, I think there's a thing of like, she's like, she is attracted to this. She is, you know, attracted to the idea of Mitchum as a person and like the poem and like being him. But really, she's more just like attracted to him as an ideal, as like an expression of freedom, I think. And it was interesting to me because like her husband, Robert Taylor, who I forget the what's
Alan.
the character's Alan, Alan. Alan, I think is, you know, he is seeing the undercurrent of her is like she is not a real person to him. And I think that's the real tragedy, like that really sort of affected me and made me very sad watching it. Of like, you have this like, you know, like, obviously Katharine Hepburn's beautiful, but like, you know, beautifully minded woman or beautifully minded person, just to, you know, even throw it in, like, she's a beautifully minded person and she gets with a guy who just totally does not appreciate that in any way at all, and is instead looking for her to fill a role, which she attempts to do, but it kills her. It kills her in a way that like is deep and, you know, menacing, and she can't help, as we were talking about, like her curiosity and like the detective stuff, she can't help knowing that these things like don't make sense on a fundamental level for her, at least. Maybe not even, you know, I would argue for most people, but like for her, they don't make sense for her to be in this type of relationship. And so like, that was like the real, like, you know, I was happy about the ending where she got to, you know, not that she was able to meet Mitchum, but that she just wasn't with this guy anymore and that he died, and she's able to, hopefully now with some like, you know, hoping she inherited all the money, like the finances to kind of like become Katharine Hepburn, who Katharine Hepburn was in real life, as opposed to this character. But that was like the real, I mean, it was gut-wrenching to watch, of like, it's this person who is encouraged to go into this thing that is extremely bad for her, and well-meaning by her dad, malicious meaning by Alan, like they both, but it's like they're both, I guess it just like real bad fault there, in a way that that was like almost the part where I saw it a bit like Now Voyager, or Now Voyager in particular, like with the way that Betty Davis's mom treats her in that, as sort of like the classic narcissistic parent. Like that's also, I think, why I'm thinking about it in like the as sort of like a mini genre. But yeah, there was just something about that was just pretty gut-wrenching to watch, in a way that reminded me of stuff more considered melodramas. And I think your point about the detectiveness of it does like help lean it into noir, and also because of just like how specifically economic it is expressed, because of, as we talked about, the alienation, I think, of Alan, and him wanting to have her fit a role in a thing, but like he's just collecting her in the same way that he does an invention. And like, the more I think about it, the more I hate his character, like just like deeply, and just sort of despise, like it's like a thing of like, you know, we talked about having empathy for him, and like we should have empathy for him, and like, you know, I don't think the dad is just this well-meaning guy. His name is Dink. You can't really be too evil if your name is Dink, I think. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, if there was some Nazi out there named, like, you know, Carl Dink or something, but
it's a pet
like,
name. That's like such a classic thing of being like, of showing a woman character's like independence is her refusal to call her father to call her father or papa or dad or anything. She has to come up with a new name for the patriarch, and that is a shorthand that a lot of film and stories will do to show you that a woman character does not conform to the patriarchy as she should, because she won't call the patriarch in her own life the right honorific. So she gave him her own name, Dink, which is a diminutive. Like it's a humiliating, non-masculine, non-patriarchal. It's fundamentally a disrespectful nickname for her father. But he's fine with it. Like, that's the thing, and that shows you how she's been raised, makes the lifestyle that she married into completely unsustainable. It does not work, because she will never respect Alan as a patriarch in the way that he needs in order to remain stabilized. And at the same time, like, the source of any kind of sympathy that you can have for Alan, and he talks about it at the end when he's talking to Michael, being like, I've got her now, I can't lose her, she's the thing that will help me be right. And it's because he recognizes her as existing outside of these structures that imprison him. And so I think that he sees on some level that, like, maybe she can pull me out. Maybe she can save me. Maybe she's my manic pixie dream girl who can make me feel again and give me a new way of living and a new way of surviving. But the truth is that it's too late. He's already a monster. He's already a golem. He's already sacrificed his humanity by committing murder for monetary and monetary gain and for an ego load, like for his own self-esteem. Like, it's too late. It's over. It's like, that's why he doesn't even have to tell her about the murder. All he has to do is reveal the truth of his own psychological and emotional conditions, expressing to her, like, you will never leave me. That's it. And she recognizes it once she sees that, the patriarchal possessiveness, the depth of his corruption. So she doesn't even have to know about the murder, even though like that was Michael's condition of, like, she has to accept you as a murderer for me to be okay with this and to just let you live and get away with it, which is like amazing and talks about freedom. You were talking about how Michael's character very much represents freedom, and freedom can only exist where there's truth. Yeah. Because you can only have consent where there's truth, and you can't have freedom without consent. And I think I think you're really on the money talking about how she's attracted to Michael as a symbol of freedom. And I think that she not only kind of like falls in love with that, but I think she also wants to be that. And like, that is like, you know, people talk about, you know, Katharine Hepburn is like, you know, having this masculine edge. And, you know, and what I really think is, like, people talk about, or, you know, Freud talked about penis envy, or like talk about like women like envying men what they have, and it's like women just want freedom, and so men often symbolize that, and so then they want that, they want to be that man. So on the one hand, she wants to know Michael and be with Michael, but she also wants to be Michael. She and the fact that they share this poem, and she says, like, we speak the same language, he understands me, I understand him. And I also I think that the qualities that she shares with Michael are also what attracted Alan to her, because I do think that Alan wants to be Michael, and I think he also desires Michael. Like, I think he wants to be loved by Michael. He wants to experience the euphoria of that love that other people experience, you know, because he cares for them. But Michael can't love Alan because Alan's not lovable. Like, that's the thing, is that just like when you sacrifice your humanity like that, people can't love you, you know? Yeah. And it's just like he has made himself an island. He has severed himself.
He's a boss.
It's
a boss. He reminds me of every boss I've ever had.
Exactly.
Like, you can't love a boss.
Yeah, he's not part of the body. He's like, he's cut himself off, and there's no sewing you back on. It's done. It's over, and like that's his tragedy, and that's what makes him dangerous.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that about like the diminutive name. You know who else? Because I wrote a note to, kind of to the earlier point about like the, you were talking about. How Hawks sort of created Oren Bacall, and like, you know, it's like the idea of like kind of comparing that to Alan's character of like, which I think Hepburn calls out of like explicitly in the movie of like he wanted, he doesn't like, he knows how to fix her dress and like, or he knows how to like make her dress better at the first party. She accuses of him, but she says he didn't do that because if he did that, then he wouldn't get credit for the change. I think is
exactly
like something about the line. Like,
if they had not seen the before, then you wouldn't have gotten credit for the after. So it's like she completely clocked it after hearing those women speak about it and contextualizing all of the other behavior. She's just like, yeah, you humiliated me. You showed everyone how I didn't fit in because I don't live this lifestyle. I don't have those clothes. I don't do my hair like that. That's just not how I am. And you humiliated me and you displayed me, you know, like you put me on display for everyone so they could see what you were working with, the diamond in the rough, you know what I mean?
Prototype
and then,
to finish invention to, for the metaphor
yeah,
of the movie.
being like, and exactly, just, she says, and then now I'm your creation, just like the distance control, like I am your creation.
Yeah. The reason with it reminded me of it with the name thing about like the diminutive is because like that's a thing I believe Aaron Sorkin has been accused of. I think not by allegedly and not by me, but of like specifically the on one hand he is known for sort of writing characters, especially on The West Wing, that are fairly forward and powerful and in powerful roles, but some have accused him of like the sort of Sorkinian woman, I think, of like it's always got to be a male name, like it's like Sam or CJ, or something like that. I think on like CJ's on The West Wing, and I can't remember some of the other ones. Sam's Rob Lowe on it, but it's interesting. Like Hawks, there's also, if there's a Sorkinian woman, probably the one that Sorkin always reminds me the most is Hawks, just given like their dialogue and like the way. Just the way they make the movies and productions they're involved in. And there's also a Hawksian woman, which Lauren Bacall and Hawks also directed Hepburn in Bringing Up Baby. The modern example also reminds me. There's another kind of thing that is, I don't know how I feel about him. I like his movies, but and I like Sorkin's movies and I love Hawks' movies. But Tony McNamara, who did The Great, the TV show with Elle Fanning, and he did The Favorite, which is one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years, and he did Poor Things, and I think he just did another one that came out that I can't remember. But he also has a thing for like a very specific type of woman where it's like, allegedly, I'm not saying this, but if someone who might be me might have said like it's almost like a fetishization kind of horny type of like creation of it in a way that reminded me of like there's always been something slightly uncomfortable. Hawks less so, to be honest with you. Because like it makes sense that he would be like that with Warren Bacall, but I feel like it comes through less in the films of like that he's like very specifically just jazzed up for it. But Sorkin and Tony McNamara, like they have their ideas of like what of like their of like I feel like it's almost like an ideal woman, but like some of it tends to come across as fetishistic in a way that like it was interesting seeing this movie because I've always been vaguely uncomfortable with it on some level, even though I like Sorkin's a brilliant writer in many ways. Although I think I'm going to do a video about this that you'll probably appreciate. I think he is one of the main people responsible the most for like the tragedy of the Democratic Party of like the last 25 years, just giving people a totally false impression of what politics is like with the West Wing. I think he corrupted an entire generation's like just to make a political show, like make a Shakespearean beautifully written political show that like, and I love the West Wing and like I love it practically, but it's the most unrealistic thing. Like Lord of the Rings is closer to reality than the West Wing, I feel like, in many ways. Just because of like there's just no material things like it I think it literally killed probably large parts of the first Obama administration because of like I think a lot of people are just marks for that show. Like the younger people like, oh, it's just gonna be, we'll just shame the Republicans and then they'll have like a thing, and it's like, no, they won't. It's not. It's, you got to look at their material interests. They're not going to do this thing. They're not going to do the thing that they do in the West Wing of like, oh, we feel bad, so now we're going to pass it. You've convinced us with argument. It's like that's not a thing that works. But I think Alan's the only character I've seen that like portrays that kind of dynamic, which was a big thrill for me because it's kind of like there's something a bit repulsive about it of like I'm gonna on one hand I love it and I think it's a good sign for movies in general when people are horny when they're directing or like when they're ginned up. I just think it's like, because that to me it means it's like they're so obsessed with something that like they're probably also obsessed about sound design or cinematography. I have this theory that like the more you can tell a director's horniness, the better the movie is a lot of the time. But also the tragedy of that, I use the word tragedy a lot, the downside of that I feel like is you get characters like they tend to only write those things and like they're not actually empathizing with like the women characters that way in a true way that gives them a lot of respect and like that you should with any character or person you're writing. But to see Alan like that is like, this is that guy. Like he could be, I don't know. Yeah, the creation of a woman is like, yeah, it's another brutal thing about this movie to watch. It's just very, very sad.
It's total objectification. It's the ultimate form of objectification of I'm gonna revise you, I'm gonna rework you in my image and construct you in order to serve this purpose, like you were this decorative thing in my life. You are a trophy. You were the proof of my virility and plenty. And it's like the fact that he knows so much about women's clothing, right? Like he goes to that designer, he goes to that store, and the people that work there all know him. Like those women all know him. And he has this, and it's just like, so he clearly, every woman he dates, he takes shopping.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's very clear that is his habit, is that he is very particular. He's very controlling. Everything is done to his specifications, to the point that, that he's like well known and having and exchanging banter with these women at this fashion house. It's wild.
I'll probably cut this out because I don't want to, but do you think Kanye has that type of relationship with like a plastic surgeon that he knows? Because like some of the stuff, I'd be curious about. Like it feels like he's had a succession of women trying to like look the same after Kim. I think maybe it's just the one, but like even the other ones, like there's something very grotesque about that. Watching it from afar, not trying to body shame anyone or shame in like maybe she has full agency. I don't get the sense that she does. I get the sense that he's trying to do some type of like simulacra. He's probably a good film noir. You probably do a whole topic about that, but there seems to be like we are desperately in need of some film noir. It'd be so relevant given our class situation, I think, in America, and also just some of the psychological quirks of. Yeah, I mean, you could totally do an Alan type character. I think about Kanye.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of men out there who have good relationships with plastic surgeons, like I do, and I think that
for their partners.
Yeah, for their partners. Yeah. I think that is probably very common amongst the ultra rich right now. I think that's why so many, like, I think that's why MAGA face like exists. Like, I think I think that's why there's this whole demographic of conservative woman who looks this particular certain way, and I think that is because it's a set standard among the men. Like it's just a way of demonstrating in group versus out group, of like, my breeder has the MAGA face, which means that I should have a position of authority within the hierarchy. You know, it's just that's a part of the automation.
It's disturbing on a deep level. Those, I mean, I hate to comment on women's appearances in negative ways, but
no, it's important. It's important because
someone
it
called
shows
it like
this...
a troll. You know, that was not like a troll and like that, but they said like they're purposely making it so bad, like almost objectively, that it's like almost another way to try and own the libs, which I thought was like one of the most interesting takes on it. It's like, I'm going to make myself look so terrible to own the libs. It's like the next phase of that, of like, now even to look at me, you have to, like, I'm so objectionable even philosophically that now even physically you got to look at me and just be disappointed and fucked up by it, which is...
Yeah, I think there's a lot of spite in there, but then I also think that there is just like a massive disconnect from reality. Like, I think that there is a lot of like delusion and like this kind of I think there's a lot of OCD involved in it, and then I also think that they are struggling with the long-term consequences of pedophile culture, because I feel a lot of it is really the aversion to wrinkles, to lines and wrinkles. Like, that's why they're all so puffy, is because they're full of filler, and they're so stiff because they're full of Botox, because it's become so normalized among men in these certain sets to just be pedophiles. Like, I mean, as we're seeing, we're constantly talking about the Epstein list and all of this stuff. Like,
allegedly
it's like
with our president,
we're having to come to terms with the law, you know, as we're going into late stage capitalism. Like, we're seeing the depravity really come to a head, and just being like, this is the problem with the.
You gotta watch Sallow.
The acceleration of it is so bad. Like, it's so bad, and I think that it's not unlikely that very soon, within a couple of years, that we'll start seeing these MAGA women, like once they pass the new age of consent laws and these marriage laws, that we're going to start seeing a lot of these men trotting out 15-year-old wives. Like I think somebody's going to break the seal and divorce a wife, and then a year later he's going to have a 15-year-old bride. And I think we're going to
one guy, right? Who's the senator that actually somehow lost to Doug Jones? 2018. That probably won't happen anymore. Probably. Yeah. That was like probably the last moment of like, shockingly, Alabama was like, okay, we can't have a guy who went after allegedly, very young women. I can't remember. It was Roy something. He was like a former judge that. Yeah. Whenever the guy lost to Doug Jones, thank God I forget his name.
But yeah, I think that's what's going to happen is we're going to start seeing a lot of these MAGA women getting replaced with literal teenagers. Yeah. And that's just, that's such a theme in film noir too, where it's just sort of like the escalation is unavoidable because these things are unsustainable, and it just keeps getting more and more depraved and more criminal, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds until it explodes into horror.
The darkest thing, I mean, the funniest thing I've maintained, Trump is just horrific in 99.999% of all, 100% of all ways. He's a horrific being, and he is, you said the golem, he is a golem of America. He is in large part what we deserve for so much. If I put on my pessimism hat,
I wouldn't say deserve, but more like he was guaranteed. Like it's like we constructed him. The systems that we made, created the circumstances and the people in order to grow him. It's like he's not a golem so much as he is this like tumor-laden little pumpkin that we grew in our meth lab poisoned garden. Like it's just like we grew him organically. Like he came to be organically, and it's just so gross.
Do you know his two favorite movies? Famously,
no, what are his two favorite movies?
You might pass out at one of them. So the first one is a fast-forwarded version of the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Kickboxer. And specifically, multiple people, like when he would watch it, he would have his son Eric. Explains a lot about Eric Trump too, allegedly. But he would have like Eric fast forward through all the parts so they could just watch the fight scene. So he turns like a 90, 120 minute movie into like a 45 minute. Which Kickboxer is a good movie. Shout out Kickboxer. If you ever want a good film story, it's based off this really allegedly fake kickboxer who said he was going into the secret fight in the woods called the Kumite. It's this guy, like one of these great like martial arts liars. I keep feeling allegedly, but one of these great martial arts liars that like basically had his friend or had some guy like say like he told this guy like, yeah, I gotta go to this secret death fight tournament in the woods. Can you drive me there? And the only thing he brought was a big duffel bag, like a huge like 6-foot duffel bag that looked like it had a trophy in it. And he got the guy to drive him to the woods. The guy dropped him off, and he said, pick me up in 2 days or 3 days or whatever. And the guy picked him up in 3 days, and the guy just had the trophy. And he said, yeah, I killed a bunch of people, or I won all this stuff. And then they made the movie Kickboxer based around that. I think it was the Kumite. And so it's like a reel about like a fighting tournament. But that's one of his favorite movies. The other one, and it is his most famous movie, Donald Trump's favorite movie, is Sunset Boulevard, which explains him. I think it explains the power of movies, because it is probably the most hard. Like people have said, like he just goes into a trance watching it, because like he loves it, and he just always like gets like this wistful tone of like just like Norma Desmond, big star, Pastor Prime. Now it's like he just goes into like this thing of like there's nothing. I think to your point about like they're gonna be replaced with a bunch of younger women, totally. And I think that's going to be a fear. And like, if ever we needed, I hope they don't do a remake, but a movie like Sunset Boulevard that would sort of speak to these. There's going to be a whole generation of Norma Desmonds, I think, and to your point, in probably a couple years of just like MAGA-fied, like MAGA makeup Trump women.
They're going to get abandoned. Like there's a movie from the 90s called The First Wives Club. Did you ever see that movie?
No.
It's Bette Midler, Diane Keaton and Goldie Hawn.
Nice.
And they were college friends, and this takes place in New York in the 90s. They were college friends, and they had a college friend who in the present day is played by Stockard Channing, and Stockard Channing gets dumped. She's wealthy, and she gets dumped by her husband. He dumps her for a younger woman, and she kills herself. And so then these three friends unite. Goldie Hawn is an actress, like Bette Midler is just like a mom or whatever, and I forget what Diane Keaton does. And so they reunite, and they're like, oh, this is all so sad. And then it turns out that all three of their husbands leave them for younger women. And then so they unite and decide that they're going to start this little club, the First Wives Club, and the focus is to get revenge on their three husbands. And as they're progressing through it, like, they realize that, like, revenge was not enough. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. Just because I can, and it's fun. What they end up doing is they get all this dirt on their husbands and extort a whole bunch of money out of them so that they can start, like, basically a women's shelter, to be like, they name it after their friend, and it's like basically like providing resources and support to other women. And I feel like that every time one of these MAGA wives gets dumped by her husband for a younger woman, she should be kidnapped and strapped to a chair like a Clockwork Orange and forced to watch that movie like 30 times. And just like reconnect and like become a girl's girl again, because like that's like what the kind of messaging is there. But instead they're probably just going to turn inward and just be further terrible because white women are just as corrupted by white supremacy as white men. And we will throw anyone under the bus in order to get proximity to white maleness, to get that power. We will absolutely betray everyone. We will betray our class. We'll betray our gender. We will do anything in order to get close to power and to get power for ourselves. Oh my gosh, it cracks me up every time I hear about like conservative women, like, pundits like suddenly finding out that suddenly getting a taste of misogyny from the men in their lives, of being like, shut up, go back to the kitchen, or like, what are you talking about? And they're just shocked because they're like, but I've been like acting as your agent. I've been out there. And they're just like, yeah, you were out there. Get back there, And it's like, it's this big shock. And I actually think that's something that like Anne kind of struggles with, that she's dealing with too, is that she's used to living under a patriarch that treats her like a human being, right? And respects her autonomy and lets her call him Dink. And then now she's being possessed by a man who wants to control every aspect of her presentation and performance, right? And possess her and hold her like an object. And she can't, it's not sustainable for a person like her. And it's really not sustainable for most people. Like, even the women who supposedly consent and submit to that, like, become drug addicts, and start getting all of that plastic surgery. I'm not saying, I think the vast majority of these women are choosing themselves. Like, they are like proactively going to the plastic surgeon, and it's like, it may be, to some other person's standard, but it's because they're terrified of the aging. They're terrified of aging out. And like, as you speaking to Norma Desmond, that's it. Like, that's her ultimate fear, is aging out and like not, being able to continue on and get attention and get validation, like, who am I if I'm not a beautiful young woman that everyone admires? Like, who am I if my face is not perfect, And I'm like, actually, like, at first I was surprised that was like one of Trump's favorite films, but then I was not surprised, because I was actually talking about this the other day, and that he knows that he's ugly, and he has known that he's ugly his whole life. And he hates that, and he's so uncomfortable with that, and he knows that is the primary reason that he was never really accepted by the New York WASPs, by the elites, by the Hollywood elites. He knows that the only reason he was ever among those people was because of his money. And as an adult, he constantly squandered his own money and had no skills and no talent, no anything. So it was literally just all inherited. All of his power, his access, his keys to these communities were only because of his father's resources. And that none of these people that he interacted with looked him in the face and saw him as a human being, like as a valid, legitimate human being. And probably the primary reason is because of how he looks and how he always looked, is that he always looked soft. His hairline and his hair are weird. His, it's like he's not, he's not a good looking man. And he knows that. He knows that deep down, and he's only gotten more hideous and looks more like a golem. And and he's deeply, deeply insecure about that and deeply upset about that. And I'm like, this is a hot take and someone might be really mad at me, but I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if Trump would have become the person that he was if his father had been a more Pygmalion type and had gotten his son plastic surgery and had taken more control over what his son looked like.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did, because that's not a thing that would occur to that guy. Like, that wouldn't. But I do think that if Donald Trump had been redesigned, if he'd been made to look like just some inoffensive, like, if he'd had a better jawline or whatever, if he'd had these different features that made him look more like a generic, conventionally handsome man, then he would have been more accepted. It's like the girls, the rich girls when they're 12, like, before, that summer, they go on a trip. And they come back and their nose and they're fixed. They get plastic surgery when they're 14, when they're 12 to 14. That's a total thing. I think that if that had happened to Donald Trump, that he would be a very different man today. And maybe he would be more evil. Maybe he'd be less. Maybe he would have just been content to be accepted by the WASPs. But I really think that, like, that appearances are so extremely important, and looking the right way is so extremely important. And, like, when we look at Undercurrent, it's like, I think we can see that because, like, Alan looks right. Like, he has the right look in order to get the access and to have the power and control that he does. But Michael kind of doesn't. Like, Robert Mitchum was, like, very handsome, but in an unconventional way. Like,
He's one of the weirdest looking guys I've ever seen in my life.
He's so weird. And it's like, how is he so handsome and so weird? Like,
doesn't make
it
a lot of
doesn't.
sense.
Yeah, but because of that, because he doesn't look right, he couldn't assume that proper role and that patriarchal position. He couldn't be Alan because he doesn't look like Robert Taylor, So it's like he couldn't assume that role. So the fact that he didn't have access to that gave him a certain amount of freedom. And that freedom also comes, too, from being the spare. Like, he's the younger brother, right? So it's like he, by virtue of not having access to that position, in a way, he was, like, spared a lot of the programming and the pressure and indoctrination that transformed Alan into the golem. So it's like looks and appearances, and that's also why Alan is so particular, and like why he knows so much about women's clothes and why he makes Katharine Hepburn look the way she does, is because he is acutely aware of all of the elements that give him his power. And looks are such a huge part of that. And Donald Trump knows he's ugly, hates that he's ugly. That's been one of the largest driving forces in his life, is his insecurity over his own body. He hates his body. He hates his face. He hates his penis. He thinks there's something wrong with all of it. And that's just, and then that is manifest destiny in a way. Yeah. He made himself even more hideous over time.
Yeah. He's the originator of the MAGA makeup.
It's so rough.
Yeah, I think he, I've said it probably once before at least, but like, I would feel more bad for him than almost anybody I've ever seen in public life if he didn't do the things he did. Like, if he wasn't who he was, it's an incredibly sad person. He's one of the saddest people. It's like, there are several off ramps. I mean, there's like many people have pointed out, and I agree with this, that like, if he had just been able to be a Broadway producer or something, or like some type of theater producer. He loves musicals. If he would have just been able to be a Broadway producer, he would have been a lot happier. If the world, like, that's his own Hitler art story thing. Like, someone should have, someone should have done that.
I mean, it's like, you know, but at the same time, like, he's not entitled to that. He had no talent. He has no talent. He's not entitled to it.
Yeah.
And it's just like an
He's
untalented
funny.
person.
I'll say that. He's a good poster. He was a funny Twitter poster for many years.
I don't know.
I don't know
never
if in any
saw the
intentional
appeal.
way.
I never saw the appeal. But I don't know, that's just me. But like,
Some of his
it's
turns
like,
of
in a
language
way,
are
like,
unintentionally good.
I feel like he has a lot in common with Harry Fabian also, where it's just like, he was a man who could not accept mediocrity. Like, he couldn't just be some guy. He had to be somebody. You know, it's like he had to be important. He had to be famous. He had to be admired. He had to have power. He couldn't just be a real estate guy.
Yeah.
He couldn't be just a guy who owned a bunch of buildings and was super rich.
He can't just
because
be the
of real
president.
estate. Yeah, he can't just be
anything. Yeah.
He has to be the king. Like, he has to be, it's like, and because the hole, it cannot be filled, you know, and he'll destroy the world because of it, because he can't fill this and because he doesn't have the talent. You know, it's like Harry Fabian, that sculptor describes him as an artist without an art, you know?
Yeah.
And where it's sort of like he has the passion of an artist, but he doesn't have the talent, and society does not provide him a medium that would work, you know? It's like he did such a great job. We see that scene at the beginning where he manipulates the three Americans into going to the hostess club, right? With the little grift with the wallet in order to earn their trust, and then, you know, weaponizing their friend in order to get them to go to this club. And it's like, that is like pretty minimal, like low impact grifting.
Yeah.
You know, it's small time. He's an angle boy who wants to be an angle man, but just doesn't have the goods. And that is not acceptable for white American men. And I also think that's one of like the biggest sources of the like incel community, of just being like, we created a system where men just can't be mediocre. You can't just be some guy. You have to be somebody. And one of the ways that you're somebody is that you have a woman trophy, you know?
Yeah. You know, I blame media for that, because that's one of the, as we've been watching like more and more and more older movies, you know, just like, especially John Ford movies, he has such an affection for kind of like the sort of shithead loser kind of Irish guys. Him in particular, that's like his expression of it. I've been finding is just like, just the guys who are just kind of just drunks and nothings. But like, he doesn't treat them like that. Like, you don't see those characters as much, I think, in modern movies, of just like, my buddy, you know, we talk about like, we talk about all the time, like, it used to be like when we were growing up, like just in our sort of shitty East Tennessee town, it's like, houses were a lot, like, things were generally less expensive, especially like housing. I've heard this is a big thing of like why Japan so weirdly has been able to like maintain more of like a history of like crafts people than America, because like housing is proportionately cheaper there, so people are able to sort of like make less money and be able to actually like have a roof over their house and be able to like spend it in a way that like here you have to have a 40-hour job. And certainly, like, you know, with all the private equity companies, again, all it comes back to them even buying houses and driving up home prices. It's like, I mean, you're in goddamn California, so you know, Tennessee is not, I mean, it's not California, but it's like, it's still gone crazy over like the last 10 years especially. But there is like a thing of like, we knew so many guys that were just like, oh yeah, that's Ron, he, you know, he works on cars a couple days a week, and he just kind of, he has a little trailer on someone else's property, you know, he probably makes a couple $100 a month, you know, he just doesn't do a lot, like, but he's just kind of just in the community. And it's like, you know, if you need something, like, he, you know, he could help you. Or like there's this other, you know, or any of those other types of guys who are like, they knew that they weren't going to be like, you know, Thomas Edison, and everybody knew that they weren't going to be Thomas Edison, and that was fine. That was like, there was still a thing of like, I feel like those types of folks had more representation back then, which is also why one of the reasons, this was the first time watching Night in the City, was it? I think
Yeah.
think it was one of the two. One of the reasons why I thought you, as like a, you know, knowing your sort of Marxist socialist content, like, would appreciate it, just because like there are a lot of characters in this that are like, almost everybody is kind of trying some type of an angle in a way that like felt very modern, even counter to other like things of the era, like most John Ford movies. Like I said, like, you know, you have a bunch of Irish guys kind of drinking and just hanging out, and you have like maybe one or two guys. Actually, another one, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Fort Apache, but you would probably. It is the best depiction of sort of a metaphorical private equity guy coming in and ruining a bunch of working class people. It's really Henry Fonda plays the guy who, like, he wants glory in that movie, and he wants to be like this general. And so it's like, it's out in the West, and like there's this nice Irish community of poor Irish people that have sort of like built up, you know, this fort. But then Henry Fonda comes in as a new guy. Is like, no, we're really going to take it to the Native Americans, and we're really going to, you know, I'm going to get my glory, I'm going to get growth, and he leads them onto these suicidal charges that just winds up destroying this community. In the same way that like he's basically doing a private equity pump and dump. But everyone in this, I'm just looking at the list of characters: Harry Fabian, like, you know, Helen Nasseros, the wife, Phil. Shout out to those two. Like Francis L. Sullivan as the club owner is one of the most just awful characters, and tragically sad, horrifically sad characters. But then you also, even like, you talk about sort of like a fail son dynamic too. I love the dynamic between Gregorius, played by Stanislaus Zabisco, shout out, and his son Christo, where it's like that almost generationally, it kind of even shows like a sort of a thing of like the old school of like, one of the many reasons I love the movie is like Gregorius is like, there's wrestling, there's very much the ideal of wrestling. It's almost like he's trying to have, it speaks to me, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like alienation of everything under capitalism. But like, one of the things that I really am more and more sort of like convinced of ever is just like how the evilness of capitalism subsuming everything and things not being able to exist. In this movie is like, I think just, it's a smaller plot of the movie, but like Gregorius is like this old Greek wrestler, and you know, he's like in love with the idea of actual wrestling, and he hates sort of professional wrestling, aka fake wrestling, like preconceived, which I love. I love professional wrestling, you know, no shade there. But it was almost like, even on that level, it got the class consciousness so well, because like Christo is like the son of it, and he's like, he has a love for his daddy, but he's like, yeah, I can't do that and still be a big man, right? Exactly to the point of you were saying, like he knows that if they try and put on a straight up wrestling show, it's gonna fail, and he's trying to protect his dad from that. But he doesn't realize that his dad's like, even if it fails, I'd rather keep my integrity as opposed to selling out, which is
that whole plot of Christo, basically, like, Gregorius is representative of the old world, and particularly the ancient world, and maintaining the traditions of the ancient world. And his son, being a product of the new world, was dissatisfied with the idea of living in the ancient world and being small and like continuing on and maintaining this cultural tradition, and instead wanted to innovate with it, to twist it. You know, it's kind of like, a great chef. And then his son also wants to be a great chef, but he also wants to define himself and separate himself from his father and be his own man. And so then he wants to do fusion, and he wants to do innovation, and that's like a classic story. But Christo was not satisfied with doing that in his own backyard, because it still wouldn't be big enough. So just like being metaphorically of the new world wasn't sufficient. He had to go to the actual new world, which for the Greeks would be London. Like, and thematically in Europe, that, you know, the London represents that, and England represents that, and that's, you know, Dracula is a great example of that, of like London represents the new world, and then its rejection of the ancient world. But whereas in a film noir, like in a horror, the ancient world strikes back, right? And is the specter and is domination. In film noir, the ancient world is destroyed. The father is destroyed by the son's need for independence, for his own identity, and for domination and for superiority, to outdo his father, to move on, to ascend to the next level, to be greater than. He's not content with maintaining his own culture and protecting his own culture, so he has to go to London and recognizes the new world is not interested in the old world, and instead manufactures something to appeal to the lowest common denominator, to appeal to this bloodlust, this thirst for violence. It's not about art, it's about violence and aggression and domination. And like, that's, England is very much the originator of this curse. Like the East India Trading Company and its role in the international slave trade and the invention of capitalism as we know it, based on slave labor. So it's like, the fact that this takes place there and that they're Greeks is like so perfect. And then, Christo is not content to just exist in that. He needs to bring his father to the new world for validation. And it's so absurd to be like, he knows his father. And he yet deluded himself into thinking that his father would approve of what he does, approve of him being a gangster and a charlatan, putting on a circus that is a mockery of everything that his father believes in. And so it's like he brought his father to the new world to die, to kill him. He killed his own father by putting him in that situation and making him vulnerable to a low-level angle boy like Fabian. He left him vulnerable because his father, being of the ancient world, has no tools for recognizing the kind of grifter that is produced by capitalism. And so it's like he is partially Oedipus in a sense. It's like he killed his own father by bringing him into this twisted urban, modern, contemporary, capitalist, crime-ridden environment. And it's like, it's deeply tragic. It's deeply tragic that this, and that's part of what makes this film noir, is this destruction of heritage, of tradition, of the loving patriarch, the loving father, to replace the loving father with the capitalist father. And gosh, it's so heartbreaking. And Gregorius is just, wow, what a character. I'm blanking on the actor's name, who was just a real wrestler. This was
Stanislav Zabisco.
Yes, Spisco. His whole death scene, the way that he delivers the request to shut the window, and just the way that is written, and the way that he plays that out, of being like, he defeats the Strangler, Mike Mazurki. Mike Mazurki was a wrestler also, but he plays Moose Malloy in Murder My Sweet, which is the first adaptation of Raymond Chandler's Farewell My Lovely, and is my favorite Philip Marlowe movie. And nice. he plays Moose Malloy, and he's so good. He's perfect.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to add
He's absolutely stellar as Moose Malloy, and he's great in this too. He's absolutely depraved, and the way that he performs this role and this character of being like, I feel like he is a golem, he is a weapon. He is this dangerous character that has been trained and raised to have almost no control over his violent rage. Like that is his purpose, is rage and aggression and destruction. And he is an agent of the capitalist system in that way. And
he's basically a cop. He's just like a cop,
And he acts on behalf of the system by killing the ancient patriarch. Right? Like, that's what his role is. His role is to disable Nicholas. His wrist gets broken because of his rage, and then to kill Gregorius. And so it's like, Christo, by headlining the Strangler constantly, has created that golem that kills his father. And man, so tragic.
Some interesting facts about Zabisco. Interestingly, despite him sort of being like the representative of the old world there's two interesting things I love about him. One is that he was the only one, Jules Dassin, I can't remember ever how to say the guy's name, but I think it's Dawson. He was a big like experimental theater lover, and before he got blacklisted, he was big in the theater scene. The only one out of the cast as they were shooting this who would go to him with all the experimental theater stuff was Zabisco. He was just like a big culture. He was just like this genuinely cultured guy. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing about him is he is the reason you could, in a weird way, this is going to be, I might do a video on this. I should probably do a video on this, but in a weird way, you could blame him for the election of Donald Trump in a weird way. It takes his steps, but in a real butterfly effect thing, like he was like, so in professional wrestling as like a history, it's like there was this big sort of fuzzy period. Are you a professional wrestling fan much at all? Or you know much about the history of it, out of curiosity?
I know a little bit, and I also know Donald Trump's associations with it. Like I know it in a like more historical context, and also when I was in 6th grade, all the boys were obsessed with professional wrestling. This was like 1999, 2000. So
that was the best era.
That was the ultimate era, and so God, they were just obsessed.
Attitude era.
Everybody was a jabroni. It was a whole thing. I'm just like, my God, you guys.
No roll, shut your damn mouth. Yeah, all that stuff. So weirdly, the connection with Trump does have a long connection with professional wrestling, but it's a bit more indirect because, like, so early in the history of professional, like, there was this big hybrid period, like it depicts in the movies, where it was like some of it was real, some of it was fake. But it was like fake for a lot of it. But then they tried to put a wrestler in, like, the audience still believed it was real for way longer until the 90s in many parts of the country. Like Andy Kaufman famously got like real death threats because of like the professional wrestling work he was doing in the 80s, which he was so good at. But like in Zabisco's time in the 20s or 30s or whatever, like he was a legit wrestler, like for real. And they tried to put a heavyweight champion in that didn't know how to wrestle, like actually wrestle, but he like sort of got up because of the predetermined nature of it. But what happened was Zabisco broke his contract, or like he got a contract with a different company, and so he was scheduled to, like, as what happens when you leave a company, to lose the belt to this new guy, so that the new guy would be seen as like, oh, he's the guy who beat Zabisco. But Zabisco's the new company he was with, he's like they were like, yeah, don't do anything like that, just like beat him, because like we don't want you losing any of your reputation. So he just went against it, and like he got in there, and like the guy thought it was supposed to be a predetermined thing, but Zabisco was such a good wrestler that he was such a better wrestler that he just dominated the guy, because like the guy couldn't actually control him. And so that freaked out wrestling promoters so bad that they did not allow, like, in order to be the heavyweight champion, you had to be a legit wrestler, because there was always the chance that you could go against some guy who like suddenly turned it on, and then it would be a real bad situation if you couldn't actually beat him, because if like the guy was supposed to lose to you but he was a better wrestler than you, then he could throw everything into it. So they didn't allow for like 50 years. This is why, like, I think it was Karl Gotch and I can't remember who the other big one was, but basically like no one was allowed to. And Luthez, shout out Luthez, he was like extremely good actual wrestler, so he was like one of the big champions from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way up until the 70s, when it started getting more into like back like into where it was, where like they started putting champions together who weren't like actually real life tough guys. One of the big ones, who was the first of this new wave, was Hulk Hogan. Because his came around in like the late 70s, early 80s for Vince McMahon's like WWF. Obviously Vince McMahon, his wife, I think is still in office of some kind. She was like his education secretary in the first term, or maybe she is now, or small business secretary.
Yeah.
But Hulk Hogan did his thing, then famously had his reality show. Then he had his lawsuit against Deadspin, because Deadspin outed Peter Thiel as gay. Peter Thiel, openly private equity is the worst thing about him. Openly capitalist. And then Thiel was one of the primary people that funded, and like his whole movement funded Trump, and like JD Vance is a Thiel guy and everything. And it's like Thiel's like sort of like one of his entry points into political life, that he realized he could have like more power, and therefore promote Donald Trump and promote Vance and promote all these guys and Musk and everything else, was because he got to sue Gawker out of existence because they published the sex tape of Hulk Hogan and I think it was Bubba the Love Sponge wife, Bubba the Love Sponge, a Florida radio guy. Like they were doing some weird, not shaming anyone, but they were doing some kind of like, not weird but complex, let's say, sexual relationship there allegedly. I don't, this is all alleged. Everything's alleged. Then Gawker published it back when they were just publishing sex tapes of people, and then Peter Thiel funded the Hulk Hogan lawsuit and then did it. But Hulk Hogan his career might have been totally different had it not been for Stan Zbyszko pitting a guy in 1930 or whatever who's in this movie, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just those little butterfly things of like, I wonder, like Hulk Hogan was, also the sadness of his career. I didn't want to say tragedy for one more time, but he was a great professional wrestler. And then, of course,
scum human.
And a very, very, very scum human for many reasons. Also, another thing, even before he was that, one of the big reasons, he is the reason, one of the big reasons that we don't have unionization in WWE.
Yeah, he was a total union buster.
Yeah,
piece of shit.
He ratted out shout out Jesse Ventura, American hero.
Yeah.
He ratted out Jesse Ventura when Ventura tried to unionize, and broke Ventura's heart. And
yeah, rest in piss.
Hulk
Hogan. Rest in piss.
Yeah, he was not a good dude.
No. That's a bummer. But that's interesting. That's such an interesting twist. It's like,
weird story, right?
Yeah, it's integrity that's so interesting. Like even integrity under capitalism can contribute to long-term like negative consequences. Like that's one of the things. It's like there's no ethical way to participate in capitalism because capitalism appropriates all that threatens it, including your own integrity.
Yeah, I really love that about this movie. It was, every person, like that was the thing of like, this was like months ago when I did a video. One of the earlier negative comments I got, I've only been doing my TikTok not that long, but like one of the earlier negative comments I got was like, oh, sounds like you don't like movies with bad characters or negative characters or like whatever else. I was like, you should watch Night in the City, because like one of my favorite movies, this is like in my top, I think it might be in my top 15, top 20, one of my all-time favorite movies. Just about every character in this movie is a piece of shit in some way. I think like
there are like two characters. Yeah,
weirdly,
Gene Tierney and the sculptor are basically okay. Like they're okay. She's just an enabler, you know. But
she's just, she's doing her best. It's weird for Gene Tierney to not be like. If I did not, it's not a complaint about the movie, but if you're gonna make the movie longer, just knowing Gene, which we need to get into actually. By the way, this might be a good pivot for that. So I remember months ago, maybe in comments or DMs or something, but you had said that you don't like Leave Her to you don't sympathize with her character, empathize with her character in Leave Her to Heaven, or you think she's a bad character?
Well, I think that she is a narcissist and a psychopath.
Okay.
And everything that she does is for her own benefit, that she is the predator of the story. She's not the victim. She's not in any capacity a victim. She's not in any capacity. Like, no one in the story is victimizing her. Like, sure, whatever, the patriarchal, whatever. But she's also rich and white and was about to marry a prosecutor who looks like Vincent Price in New York. She had tons of agency and power, and she wielded it. And when people didn't do what she wanted and didn't give her all of their attention, she turned to violent crime and harassment and coercion. And I think a lot of people who had bad moms will understand what I mean. I think a lot of people who had narcissistic mothers will see that in her. Yeah. She's the monster of that movie. She's
Have you seen
the
Now
villain.
Voyager, by the way, with Bette Davis?
I have been. I saw Now Voyager when I was like 3 years old. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it a million times. I just bought the Criterion Blu-ray. I'm obsessed with Now Voyager. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
The best depiction of a narcissistic mother, I think, in all movies for me. Like it was so uncomfortable to watch. Mm-hmm. My mom was not that, but it's like just as many many
Yeah.
people growing up.
I
around, like, yeah.
it's like I had a wacky childhood, and I grew up around a lot of different types of mentally ill people.
Shout
And
out.
I grew up around a woman who I think was like she was like an intersection of borderline personality disorder and narcissism. So it really is like pathological self-centeredness, you know, and that everything and everyone has to revolve around them. And like feminine narcissism is different from masculine narcissism in a lot of different ways, and that it is extremely passive aggressive and deeply manipulative and tied up with vanity in a different way.
Yeah.
And Gene Tierney's character Ellen in Leave Her to Heaven is very much like that, where she has to have total control over all of the men in her life. Women are largely just servants and props. And she and her slightly incestuous obsession with her own father drove him to his death. Like, her love and obsession and devotion is lethal. It's terminal.
Explicitly Greek, that movie. Like, that has a lot of, like, explicit
Yes.
references to
And,
Greek mythology.
You know, and it's like, and throughout the entire movie, she's constantly exercising her own agency and her own power and authority. Like, the little brother is in her way. Her little brother has ruined all of her plans for their future and their relationship, because she has to go to this cabin that has thin walls so they can't have sex. And the little brother is clearly her husband's favorite, the most important person in his life, and will always get attention over her. So what does she do? She kills the disabled child.
Yeah.
And
Probably
then,
the most horrifying scene,
yeah.
I think, in movies.
Oh, it's one of my favorites of all
Yeah.
time, where she just, it's so clever.
Folks,
It's
if
so
you haven't seen it,
depraved.
even if we're
it's-
spoiling it now, you will not believe it. I could not believe it when I watched
Yeah.
it.
Genius.
I
And
can't-
it's
yeah.
truly depraved. It's truly depraved.
Depraved is, it's depraved.
Perfectly
It's,
executed, a perfectly executed execution with like the ultimate plausible deniability. And
it's one of the most
then,
horrifying things I've ever heard in my life. Just his screams and just the
yeah,
silence.
and her just
yeah.
watching him and the sunglasses and the way that she is with the robe and like the stillness of it demonstrates her antisocial personality, like
Now-
her lack of regular human emotion.
I did set it to Jesse J's price tag and post it on my Patreon. So if you want to see that, subscribe to my Patreon. Just did that recently because
That's
just
funny.
trying to do. I might do a whole series of
Yeah.
Gene Tierney empowerment movies, but
I think
like clips.
I think where we disagreed was around the abortion when she
Well, I
ends
think
the
the
pregnancy.
victim. I guess, like, you did say, like, you said, like, she's not a victim in any way. I like that, but you also said, like, victim because of, like, I agree. I think I agree with, like, the characters in the movie. No one's, like, actively. Although I will say I do like the reading of her sister being conniving as well. I think that, like, because it makes the ending of the movie make more sense, and also I think, like, that would be the sort of thing for Dana Andrews. I think it's Dana Andrews, right? Not Dana Andrews.
No, it's
what's his face? I always forget.
oh, I'm blanking on his name too.
Yeah, I was Cornell Wilde.
Cornell Wilde. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I think the sister is
Jean
lonely.
Crane, yeah.
It's like the sister is like that's the problem with.
I think she's, like,
being
speaking a little evil.
overshadowed.
She's giving out vibes as a
I mean, just
evil
how I
connoisseur,
know. Well, this also will come in, like, we argue about it being film noir, but in film noir, whenever a film noir has a femme fatale or some type of evil woman, you have to have a noir good girl to contrast her in order to remind everyone how women behave properly. And Night in the City, we have Helen, who is the femme fatale. She's the bad girl. And then we have Gene Tierney playing Mary, who is the noir good girl, where she's primarily just an enabler and largely just sort of sweet and pure. And so it's like, reading the little sister and Leave Her to Heaven as conniving in some way would violate the standards of the Hays Code. So,
Yeah.
and like the way that these films are constructed in order to message morality at the audience, the sister can't be like that. So
That's why I like it, to be honest with
so
you.
it's like,
you know?
yeah, but I think you're reading into it. I think you're projecting that onto her because it makes it more interesting.
Well,
Like I get that. I think that that's just, you just want that to be the case, because then that it sort of makes them both products of something, and then off. I don't know. I get you, and I totally understand that reading, but I also think at the same time it robs Ellen's character of her evil, like of her pure depravity. Like if the sister is good,
Yes.
then she gets to be evil, and
I can see that.
I love that for her. Let her be evil, Jeff.
yeah. I think she's depraved. I think it's also like it makes more sense for Cornell Wilde's character if he's just going into the same thing, because my boy hasn't been to therapy. He's not in
No.
therapy, so he's gonna get, like, even if he gets out of the relationship with the one lady that's gonna maybe killing a kid or two or three potentially, then I feel like he's just gonna do that same plot, like with the sister, is kind of how
Sure, yeah.
yeah.
In real life, but then you have to also contextualize it in terms of how films were made and the rules of the Hays Code. It's sort of like he just spent 2 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, basically, or like that he hid the abortion, like that's what he went to jail for, and so he got punished for that, which is the standards for the Hays Code. But then you also have to have a happy ending in some sense. Like there has to be, like, the bad guys punished, the good guys are okay. So he gets to go home to the girl with a hoe.
I think on the surface I do, yeah, but also I
Yes.
think like there's some Bigger Than Life I think subverts that, because like when I initially watched Bigger Than Life, have you seen that one with James Mason and Nicholas Ray directed? He's like he's on
been a while.
steroids. So it's like another gut-wrenching
When
movie.
was that?
56, I think, 55,
Okay.
56.
That's about 10 years after Leave Her to Heaven. So you got to
Yeah.
remember that too. So that's like that is
More
once we get into the 50s, then they're starting to really grind against the Hays Code,
Yes.
Like they're starting to really make some headway against it. But Leave Her to Heaven was 46, so they were still very much trapped by that. So that's a thing you got to factor in. It's like
it is.
what you're bringing to the movie from your own desires and from the ways that you want to read it,
Well-
where it's like a Laura, like in Laura, like
Yeah.
I in some ways project bisexuality onto Vincent Price's character. It's like you can say that I'm bringing
Vincent
that
Price projects bisexuality, and if it's like just him as a
exactly
person,
exactly. So it's like I'm bringing like a more contemporary sensibility to it, and like analyzing something that the writers did not intend.
Yeah.
Like no one was trying to say that his character Shelby Carpenter was a bisexual, but it makes everything make sense.
Yeah.
Because bisexual men can be friends with women.
Yeah.
And that's really what's happening with his character, is all these women are falling in love with him because he's treating them like friends. Like he's
Yeah.
treating them like human beings that he can spend time with. He's complimenting their hats, and just like he's a great guy to be around because he'll treat you like a person, like a human being. And because women aren't used to experiencing that in 1944 or whatever, they fall in love with him. And so, but at this, that's a reading that I'm doing as a contemporary reader that was not intentional in the movie. But like with Leave Her to Heaven, you can be applying all these different readings based on our more contemporary knowledge. But when you look at the actual context of the way that the film was made, the little sister is innocent, and she's Cornell Wilde's reward. She's the balm, the consolation prize. But like, you went through all this and everything was really horrible, but it's okay. Now you have a sweet wife. Now you have a nice sweet wife who will tend the garden and not abort your babies and not kill your little brother, and it makes the audience feel okay and feel better.
Well, I think the Hays Code reading of it would certainly be that, and like I think that's probably what the majority. But I think like this is where, not that to your point intent matters at all, but I would be deathly curious to know what John Stahl and the writers were wanting to do, because in Bigger Than Life, I hated the ending when I first watched it, like 5 minutes afterwards, because like for the viewers, still go watch the movie regardless of whether or not I'm spoiling it for you or whatever. But James Mason is like this. He's getting feminized by society. I have a video on it on my channel if you go way back. But he's getting feminized by society. He's like this head of this nuclear family. He's having to take a second job. He's a public school teacher. He's in medical debt. It's actually one of the first and best examples of like an American getting screwed over because of medical debt. And he's having, so his heart, like he's having, I don't know if heart issues, but like issues with like his blood of some kind. So he has to like go on this experimental steroid medication, which turns him into like a fascist, like a despot, a tyrant. He starts abusing his wife and kid, and it's a really gut-wrenching movie. Now, what the movie does nicely is it's like the call is definitely coming from inside the house, because like he goes to the school and he starts talking about, he does return to tradition type stuff. He's like, we need to start bringing back, corporal punishment. We needed to do this. We need to do that. We need to like, he's literally, it's just like exactly what you'd hear out of a modern Republican politician. But the movie ends with like him getting off of it and off the medicine, and like he's like hugs his wife and kids, which is like ostensibly sort of the happy ending, like Hays Code ending of the thing of like, I'm so glad we beat like this temporary issue I had with my medication. But like all the conditions, the debt, the feminization, like the rotten underbelly of the American nuclear family in the 1950s, and the thing you were talking about with Harry Fabian, the sort of alienation of like needing to be someone. I did a thing in my video on it, like there's a million different travel maps of places he's never going to get to go to in the house. So he's like constantly wanting to be like this like rich guy who can take his wife on and kids on like these vacations. But I hated the ending when it did. But then I realized like I think what Nicholas Ray was doing was sort of like, it's not a happy, it's like a cursed ending, because it's like all the conditions are still there, and it's like it's presented as a happy ending, but it's like I think deeply ironic. So that's where I'm curious. I definitely am reading, my thought into it. Of like what I think makes more sense for the characters and like what's going to happen to Colonel Weld and Gene Crane. But I'd be curious if like there was that, with him, and Douglas Sirk did it a few times, of like you almost had to sort of get around the Hays Code conventions, like with the ending courtroom scenes and with like the melodrama stuff. So yeah, I need to see if there's like production notes history.
The way that I think that it would play out, like if we got a sequel or if we saw what happened, just the way that things are set up, like you said, we say,
leave her also to heaven.
It's like you say he's like not gotten therapy, and like neither is the little sister. And I think the little sister has also defined her identity as not being like Ellen. And so I feel like that, being the good girl is very much her identity. But I also think that, Cornel Wilde's character, like if they got married and they got together, I think that he would become a paranoid person. Like I think he would start reading the way that you read into it. I think he would start projecting manipulation and conniving behavior onto the sister. I think he would start being like, you're like Ellen. I think he would turn her into Ellen. And I think he would twist things that she did, and I think it would become another noir. And I think that it,
like My Cousin Rachel. That's
like he might try to murder her and then end up dead. Like I do. Yeah. I think that he would start spinning out and also wanting revenge on Ellen. Yeah. And so I think that would be the tragedy of it. I don't think that they would end up happily ever after. I think that he, by virtue of his trauma, the 2 years that he spent there, I think that he would destroy whatever happiness that he might have had with the little sister. Also, because I think the little sister, by virtue of trying to be so different from her own sister, would crush down anything possibly negative. She would never argue. She would never have any conflict. And then that would inevitably make her passive aggressive in some way, and it would make her manipulative, but it would not be in the way that Ellen was. It would be in her desperately trying to differentiate herself from her sister, which we see through the whole movie, and her efforts to save him after Ellen kills herself. And actually the killing yourself as in order to ruin someone else's life, like that is also like that's a classic film noir theme, and that happens in Night in the City, when Nosferatu kills himself.
Monster movie. I mean, like Bride of Frankenstein is like a big
but it's just like to take revenge on someone. Like Nosferatu takes revenge on his wife. He's like, he realizes I can never own her. I can never have the life that I need. I'm never going to have a woman who desires me because of our fat phobic society, etc. Like no woman is ever going to want me the way that I want to be wanted. So I'm going to kill myself, but I'm going to also leave my entire empire to the flower lady. Right? and like that is his revenge against Talon. So he kills himself to free himself from never being somebody and to take revenge on a spouse. And like that is like that's a theme. Actually, this is just a funny little coincidence that I'm going to twist it into a little bow. There is a Philip Marlowe novel called The Lady in the Lake. I don't know if you're familiar with it, where Philip Marlowe...
There's a movie based on that, right? Isn't there a...
Yes, and the actress...
first person one?
Yes, where Philip Marlowe is the camera. And the actress who plays... I'm blanking on her name again... in Undercurrent, the girl that Alan really wanted. What is her name again?
That is...
It was her, like, debut role or something.
I think it's Jane Meadows, Sylvia Lee Burton.
Jane Meadows, yes, thank you. Jane Meadows is in, like, one of her other biggest roles was in Lady in the Lake, that movie. But in the novel, Philip Marlowe actually talks about, he's like, you know, a woman has gone missing and, you know, and then we discover that she killed herself. She threw herself in the lake and drowned herself and she's dead. And like Marlowe brings up the possibility that she killed herself as revenge so that her husband would be tried for her murder. And the local cop in that town is like, no one would do that. That's horrible. There's no way that would happen. That's not going to happen. And Marlowe's like, it has happened. That happens. And it's like, that is like a total noir thing. And like and you see that in the two movies that we just talked about of weaponizing suicide.
She does that tweet. She does the tweet of like, you know, there's like the, that one guy tweeted a thing of like him, and it was like this like normie guy who's normie frat guy, of like him and three of his friends, like, you know, you can picture golf shirts, you know, salmon shorts, you know, Sperry topsiders, you know, just looking like Arizona State attendees. And it's like, you know, he's trying to be, he's like, you know, he's like, yo, you see me and my three boys out in the street, what do you do? Someone quote tweeted it with, I think it was killing myself in front of you to forever change the trajectories of your lives and shared existences or something. It's like, that's Jean. Yeah, Jean does the tweet in the...
She realizes that she can never own him, her husband, the way that she wants. He's never going to love her the way that she wants. And she's frustrated with the fact that like no one will ever do exactly what she says and exactly what she wants. And I think also recognizes that there is like no long-term future because she's aging, you know, and like and she just kind of realizes that there just like is no future, and she is like deeply depressed about that, and and has no real human feelings and can never be loved in the way that she wants. And so she's like, well, I'm going to do this out of spite, you know, I'm going to be spiteful. And die beautiful. Like, I'm going to die beautiful and perfect and the perfect victim, and everyone will pity me for all eternity and everyone will admire me for all eternity. And so she controls her whole legacy that way. But of course, that's like not how it turns out. In the end, everyone knows the truth, that she murdered his brother, that she aborted the fetus by faking a fall down the stairs, and that she killed herself so that he'd go on trial. Yeah. And like it
another
is
great scene,
queen shit. I love.
That's why I have a lot of empathy for it, because I feel like she's a pro-choice, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, is it empathy or is it admiration? Like
both,
you know,
honestly. I mean, genuinely, if you want to be pro-choice, you know?
No, the abortion isn't about being pro-choice. It's about she realizes that the baby will get
exercising autonomy.
Yes, of course, but I mean, it's not about her autonomy. It's about competition. She's eliminating the competition, just like she eliminated the brother.
That's her choice.
Exactly. But it's exactly. Yeah. But it's like, you know, but that's still a pathological and toxic motive of being like, I'm ending this. I'm ending this pregnancy because I don't want my husband to love our baby more than me. And it's like that.
It's not the greatest reason, but
and it's like, you know, I mean, women have killed their children for precisely that reason. Like, their born children have been like, you know, they see their daughters as sexual competition for their husband's attention.
Killed a born child, like a teenage child.
Yes, a teenage boy, because he was competition. And I also think that if she had lived and had she gone on, if she'd been able, like, she Like, she was gonna, you know, frame her sister. She's like either framing the sister or her husband. But I also think that it was very much on the table to kill her sister as well. Like, to kill her sister, to kill her mother. Everybody was on the chopping block. But then she decided that it would be faster and easier to kill herself. And I'm like, I get you. And yeah, and it's like, you know, you can just love her for being evil. Like, you don't have to turn it into, like, compassion, I guess, or anything. You can just be like, man, she was so evil, and I know how she was made evil, and I love that for her. Like, you can just be like, you can just love a lady for being evil. I think sometimes we get into benevolent sexism, you know, in a way, where we're seeing a woman character doing bad things, and then we try to find an explanation that kind of sort of absolves her a little bit, or gives her the benefit of the doubt a little bit. But in a way, that's just kind of infantilizing women and just being like, you know, you're incapable of being as depraved and evil as a man.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, you're not allowing women... It's like, a great example, I'm a big Columbo fan. But Peter Falk was very much a benevolent sexist, and that he didn't want to portray women as murderers. And so that what that ended up doing is denying a lot of actresses breakout roles, or these starring roles. So all of these men got to be the murderer and got to play these iconic parts, but only a handful of women did. And so that ends up having a materially negative impact on women in the industry, right? His desire not to paint women in a bad light excluded women from the productions and denied women opportunities. And so I think that this can be a little bit of a taste of that, where you don't want to let a woman be entirely evil because you want to be sympathetic to women for the oppression that we have to endure. And like, but in a way, then by doing that, you kind of harm the victims of predatory women. And this is one of the reasons that women serial killers get away with it, and women are able to kill people with impunity and get away with it. Like, I would have a much easier time getting away with murder than you would. Lizzie Borden was only acquitted because women are not supposed to be depraved murderers, and the jurors couldn't validate that because that is contrary to the patriarchy. So they protected the patriarchy by freeing a murderer. And we do that in a society. We let women get away with horrible crimes because women are not supposed to be able to under patriarchy. We're not supposed to have that power. We're not supposed to be capable of that kind of violence because that gives us power over men. We can kill men conceivably. That's also one of the reasons that we feminized poison. Poison is a dishonorable weapon. It's a woman's weapon because we have used it extremely effectively. So I think that can be kind of part of it. If like we want to soften it when it comes to women engaging in extreme violence.
I think my issue, or not my issue, I mean, I agree with, like, I totally agree / get all that. I think my, like, empathy with her character comes from, I think it's like there's so much of, like, mental illness. I made a recent, I don't know if I made a full video on this, but, like, as it relates to, like, the snake pit or whatever, but, like, there's so much of, like, mental, you know, quote unquote mental illness or, you know, neurodivergence or whatever that is, like, it's a social condition, or it's like a social issue more so even than like a personal issue. So, like, the scene that speaks to me the most in this is when she steps out of her room and she's wearing a nightgown, beautiful nightgown that is the same pattern in color as the wallpaper, as, like, as her sort of symbol, as, like, a, you know, like her fear as, like, you know, becoming just sort of part of the house in the same way that, like, Katharine Hepburn in Undercurrent was, like, you know, afraid on some level of being just an object, which is how Alan treated her, but I don't think it's how Cornell Wilde treated her in Weaver to Heaven. So it's like he's not nearly an Alan Garraway. I would have loved to see Jean against Alan Garraway. That would have been a, you know, I think she would have come out on top. I would have put it.
Oh yeah.
But I think, like, the social, like, the reason I feel a lot of empathy for her, I think, is her expression of it. There's, like, it's not that she's not evil or that she's not totally depraved or whatever, or what she does is not depraved, but had she been able to express herself, had like she been allowed to express her wants and desires and stuff on like a scale that might be more modern or whatever, like, you know, be able to say like, no, I don't want your family around explicitly in a way that would have been inappropriate for a woman to say back then, or like, you know, would have been like so total, like it would have betrayed something about her character potentially to Cornell Wilde's character, like that she's going to be this totally crazy woman or whatever if she's like, I don't want my family around, I don't want your family around. Had she been able to express herself, had she been able to actually like even secretly take birth control, like a modern woman now who was in that situation, they might secretly take birth control or something, and like, or eventually say like, no, I don't want to have a kid, like that's my right, I totally don't want to do that, I want to be childless. So there's like 5 or 6 other situations that I think would have like made her not a murderer if she would have had a bit more. She probably, I definitely think that like she was close to being it for the entire thing, and like even in modern situations there's many characters or people like her that would have ended up doing as like serious things, but like I think that's the reason I have a lot of empathy, because like had she been born 80 years or 60 years later or whatever, there's probably a lot of ways that she doesn't end up having to do those things and then kill herself, which I just feel really bad about.
I think the only way to avoid the destruction, any kind of destruction, is if she had gotten medical care. Like that's really the only thing, is that if she had been as a small child diagnosed with a personality disorder, like that she does not feel empathy, that she doesn't feel feelings the way that other people do,
which also would have been in the 20s or 30s, yes. Right? Like, so and, yeah, that's not a thing, and it's like not even a thing today. Like we don't the way that we treat like antisocial personality disorders in children makes no sense to me. I'm like, maybe someone can explain it to me, where it's just like we teach them what they lack, of like how to recognize cues and how to have empathy. And I'm like, it's the wrong way to approach it, because they are fundamentally selfish. They are pathologically selfish and like clinically predisposed to being alone because they hurt people around them. And it's like, we just don't have, even today, good methods for treating and taking care of people with antisocial personalities, because we want to, in a very sort of like in a traditional patriarchal Christian sense, want to destroy the will of a child and make them act in accordance with like the collective, right? Yeah. And so we come at it in this very punitive way of being like, stop being selfish, when it's just like, no, when you're dealing with people like this, you have to speak to them on their own terms, which is like, there are more of us than there are of you. If you don't compromise and operate on our social contract, you will be alone. You will end up in prison. You will end up in a hospital. You will end up dead. And so if you want freedom and agency and to live a life that you want to live, then you have to be safe. People have to be able to trust you. Like if you want to like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker, but I'm a psychopath or something, you know, I hate to use these words because it really is an antisocial personality disorder. Then all the people that work with you have to trust that you aren't going to put bleach in their coffee just to see what happens. Yeah. They have to trust that you aren't going to kill their dog because they annoyed you one day. You know, they have to trust that you aren't going to triangulate and start conflict among other people, orchestrate conflict among other people because you're bored and understimulated. You see what I mean? It's like we have to be able to trust you in order to interact with you. And like if Ellen had been able to have that communicated, to be like, you're not going to be able to get absolutely every single thing that you want because you're one person and we outnumber you, and someone will be smarter than you, and you just kind of have to accept that and have to compromise in order to have a life that you want to live. And so if like that had been expressed to her and she had been able to contextualize that, then she would have learned how to compromise. Yeah. And that would have allowed her to like communicate more clearly, you know? Yeah. And it's like, you know, while there wasn't like the pill, like women have always had methods for family planning, where whether it's like, you know, it's like we've been keeping menstrual calendars for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Right. Like, you know, we have had also like women have historically developed family planning methods and birth control methods for millennia. Well, but like while the pill was really great,
Like the biggest honestly, the biggest hurdle for birth control for women is men's unwillingness to pull out.
Yeah.
Like it really, at the end of the day, it's just like men refuse to participate in that process, and that is the biggest conflict. Like that's the biggest problem. But Ellen is such a bulldozer herself that it's like, I feel like that if she had been taught to communicate in healthy ways, and if she had been taught skills for compromising and communicating, then she and her husband would have been able to family plan, and they would have been able to get into her fears of being supplanted, and like she would have been able to talk about that, and there would have been ways to reassure that. And so it's like, it really is society failed Ellen. So like you can say that of like society created her. Yeah. And that sucks, and that's too bad. But then, you know, as long as we're like, if we're extending that to her, then we have to extend that to Alan Garraway, which is what I've been doing as well. And so it's like, that's the thing of like, we have to balance. Like on the one hand, we have to hold Ellen accountable and be like, she's a piece of shit and she's evil.
Drown kids.
Yeah, she's a piece of shit and she's evil and she's not a victim, but she's a victim in the way that literally all people are victims of the system. So it's like, we gotta contextualize that. So like, I don't have like, oh, Ellen, in the same way that I don't have, oh, Ellen, you know, but I am just like, oh, fuck, we made them. We grew them like the cancerous pumpkin that is Donald Trump, you know, like we made these people. And that sucks. That's a real bummer.
It is. I think, you know, it's interesting you said it's like we sort of like, kind of the same way you're like, you know, it's almost like not wanting to be sexist towards women because you don't want to, like, you want to give them the full range of being able to be depraved, right? Like it's almost the same way. It kind of reminded me when you were talking about the way, you know, we you were saying we treat kids with maybe severe personality disorders or something like that, you know, if maybe we don't give them the sort of the space to have that, and instead say, you know, it's almost like not respecting the condition enough, or not respecting the thing enough to try and like maybe pull it back a little. But
well, we don't see children as people in our society. That's the thing.
We hate children.
We hate children. Yeah. They are subhuman for the first 18 years of our lives. They are burdens or playthings, you know, or things to mold, like Pygmalion, you know. It's like, and like there's this great book. Oh, I have it right here. Actually, that's hilarious. Alice Miller. It's called For Your Own Good. And Hidden Cruelty and Child Rearing and the Roots of Violence. And then there's this other book that I'll highly recommend that's also right here, which is so hilarious. I guess I've been writing about it. It's called The Divide Itself by R.D. Laing. And it's basically like, you know, the way
Not
that
the Howard Stern guy. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
R.D. Laing, the comedian? No, okay.
No, R.D.
Okay,
Laing.
R.D. That's funny. So.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah, Artie's got range. I don't know if you know Artie from the Howard Stern show.
Yeah. Dr. Lang's first purpose is to make madness and the process of going mad comprehensible.
Okay.
And like he studied schizophrenic patients and like understanding, like, you know, in America in particular and in Western patriarchies, like child rearing is about destroying a child's will so that they become a good, compliant Christian.
Conformist.
So it is very much about it. It's brutal. It is absolutely, you know, seen and not heard, the absolute destruction of a child's will through brute force and control. And that is still, like, we still do that to this day. Like, we've collectively agreed that it's wrong to beat a dog.
Yeah.
But if I say it's wrong to spank a child, people will dogpile me. People will go crazy. My parents spanked me and I turned out fine. And it's like, no, you didn't. Tell me about your life. I guarantee you're not fine. And it's like, but that's the thing. People get really upset because they want to hit their kids, and they also want to not be victims of being hit by their parents. They don't want to believe that they were victimized. They don't want to believe that their parents hurt them, because that will challenge their identity and the relationships that they have with their families. And so it's like, as a result, it's like it still continues to color everything that we do. So when it comes to dealing with children who are identified as having antisocial personalities, people are even like, I've like watched like videos or read things, and it's like, it seems even like the doctors are irritated with these kids and just being like, why can't you just be normal? Like there's this undercurrent of why can't you just be normal? And so it is like very much kind of like punitive and also just like this rote teaching of being like, here are pictures of faces. What does this emotion mean? And it's just teaching them the bare minimum to be able to function in society instead of helping them self-actualize and helping them develop an identity and helping them actually be able to function. And it's like these kids just end up in hospitals for their whole lives, like once they're identified, like, or, you know, or they become, you know, petty criminals, like, and he ran all the way. He is an antisocial personality. He doesn't experience emotions and empathy in the way that we do. And he was made that way. Most sociopaths, most like all that stuff, like we really make them. We make these monsters. I mean, Thomas More, it's like, you know, you first make thieves and then punish them. Yeah. And so it's like we manufacture them to keep the poor in line. And then when they go too far, we turn them into slave labor in prisons. Like that's the purpose of these violent psychopaths and sociopaths and these antisocial personalities. And that is like the role of the incel. And like historically, like that's how we've raised incels, like in patriarchal Western societies. Like they were the Vikings who went on the pillaging, raping tour because they were promised women, and they are antisocial and selfish. And so they're the ones that you arm up, and you know, that's ICE. Like those are the guys who are becoming ICE. ICE agents are guys who have wanderlust and bloodlust. And they get an opportunity to just go out and terrorize the community, and that's their purpose.
I can't remember which. I think it was on Chapo I heard it, but that was like one of the. Maybe it was on Chapo or maybe it was on TrueAnon. Shout out both those podcasts, love them. But like one of them I think either had a guest on or they were themselves talking about like the idea that special forces in particular, and just like the army in general, like a lot of like this sort of more elite. It's like it's a kind of a holding ground for antisocial personality disorders, so that we can send them to other countries. And, like, if you read it, someone, like, I'm not going to name any names, but there are several people who may or may not have gotten pardoned or, like, you know, like, whatever, there's a ton of that going on in terms of, like, just what they do to everybody. Yeah. And, I mean, certainly a lot of it is environmental and just, like, you know, I'm not saying, like, they're environmentally, you know, like, it is environmental to being in a war. Like, the concept of the 1% setting all of us to war makes these horrible situations and puts it. But also there's just, like, other things behind it where they specifically kind of pick and choose for these people so that we can send them. And I'm thinking about that. It's, you know, that's actually a good segue to get into recommendations for these movies and stuff as we close out. Because I'll do a book recommendation, which I was going to bring up actually even before your books. But the Fort Bragg Cartel: Drug Trafficking and Murder in the Special Forces by Seth Harp just came out. It's a page turner so far, and Seth Harp is a reporter for Rolling Stone that has been investigating Fort Bragg out in the Carolinas. I can't remember exactly where it is. I think it's in Carolina, for a couple years now. And he wrote a book about just like, the connection between drug trafficking and murder in the special forces, and really good so far. So definitely for you, I think you'd be really interested because he comes at it from a good perspective. But then also I meant to add a Porcile by Pasolini and Try and Get Me would be, I think that might have been the other one we were thinking about doing by Cy Enfield. Because we've been talking about, you hit on Harry Fabian as like an influencer. So not like an influencer, but like a hustle guy. I think Try and Get Me has Lloyd Bridges as he's basically the first grind set guy. Along with, you could say definitely Harry Fabian and some of these other guys, but like he is very much like a TikTok sales guy influencer, and he's like it's so tremendous. I think Enfield also got blacklisted shortly after. And then I was going to ask, because you brought up German expressionism, and Peter Lorre. Have you seen Mad Love, the 1935 with him?
Oh gosh, I feel like I saw that like back in college. That's a throwback.
It's okay, like it's not as good as Porcile or Try and Get Me, but he the movie you brought up way at the beginning of the show, something around like someone's like brain getting transplanted or something. I think it was the Black Friday. Yeah. Peter Lorre is in this movie, and I think this guy, I believe, gets his hands transplanted, but they're serial killers' hands. And I can't remember if it's Peter Lorre or not who does it, but it's he looks wild. He's like very steampunk, horrific in that. So Those would be the official recs. Any Pasolini, if you haven't seen any Pasolini, are you good with any gore or any extreme stuff? Or
I'm pretty desensitized to that
okay,
kind of thing.
then yeah, Porcile, Teorema, and
good.
Sallow for sure. You'd love.
I'm passionate about like all this antisocial personality stuff because like when I was younger and like going through my own mental health journey, like that was something I investigated because I could be very desensitized to things, and I'm like, is something wrong with my empathy? You know, I'm like, is like something wrong with me? And it's just like, it's more in the tradition of like, you know, there are certain kinds of desensitized, like the way people are around empathy and the way they are around their emotions, where they can compartmentalize them well enough naturally that they can become surgeons. You know, it's like a lot of like psychopaths are drawn to surgery, but then a lot of good people are too, but they have a similar kind of desensitized nature so that they can open a person up, right? And like not be scared, you know, and like not be disgusted or horrified, you know, that they're okay with the gore of the situation just because it's a different way that their brain works. And that's one of the ways that they help society in a good way, you know? And it's sort of like, it shows you how, you know, the way that people have empathy in different ways is evolutionary and good. And that, like, it is good that some people are desensitized. It's good that some people are able to step away from emotions in that way because then they can do things like be healers. Yeah. But then under capitalism, that's warped and twisted, and those people become predators. And so then that's when you get, like, the Hannibal Lecter archetype. And that's why surgeons are one of the most, you know, and healthcare are one of the most popular vocations for people with antisocial personalities and sadistic personalities, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like these evolutionary advantages that we have get weaponized and destroyed and twisted by our capitalist system. And so that's something that I really think about because, like, even though I'm not a surgeon or whatever, like, you know, if somebody gets hurt or like if there's a crisis, you know, or something really scary is happening, I'm really good in that situation. I'm a good person to have around in a crisis. Like if everybody's freaking out, if there's a medical crisis or if there's something going on, I very much spring into action. I'm very much okay with it. And like, you know, when it comes to like gore and stuff in movies, like I'm pretty good. Unless we're getting into like sexual violence, then I just find that extremely distasteful. You know, and I just don't want to. Like, I'm just like, no, if there's a bunch of rape in this, then I'm like, no thanks. Because I also don't trust anybody who wants to make media with a lot of rape. Because I'm like, are you sure you're not just acting out your fantasy where it's like you can't rape women without getting in trouble, so instead you'll make a movie where they get raped, you know, like Last Tango in Paris, where it's just sort of like they actually did rape her, but because it's a movie, they got away with it. And so like I find myself really, really suspicious of any movie that has sexual violence in it. But gore, anyway. I went on a tangent. You were recommending a movie that had gore in it.
Well, Sallow has also that too. I mean, it's like basically 2 hours of that. But so I would honestly, even with that opinion, I would still, because I'd be curious about your take on it, because he got killed for it. I mean, allegedly, and I think I believe actually because he was so left wing and so gay, basically, that the right wing in Italy basically hunted him down and killed him for making like a series of like leftist movie. Like he was so leftist and so like abrasive about it that he did it. But he was a complex person, and the movie is very complex. Also, as left in different ways, are Pigsty and Teorema, as far as the ones I've seen. I've also seen his Medea, just speaking because I watched that in college, which is good. Has the only appearance by Maria Callas, the famous Greek actress, but I don't remember too much of it. But Porcile, Teorema, and Sallow are all... Sallow's one of the hardest watches you'll ever see in your life, but it's probably the most leftist thing I've ever done. Porcile and Teorema are easier, but also... like very spiritual and leftist in a neat way. As far as the stuff that you've talked about on the show so far, I see the Golem, the First Wives Club, Murder My Sweet, The Lady in the Lake, and then the 2 books are For Your Own Good and The Divided. Do you have... The
Divided Self.
The Divided Self, okay, yeah, by R.D. Lang. Do you have others to add to that list, or what do you... If you really liked Undercurrent in Night in the City.
If you really liked Undercurrent, then you'll obviously like Rebecca. That's not a film noir. That's very much a gothic melodrama. So I think it would be really interesting to compare Undercurrent and a couple other movies with Rebecca, because you can kind of see that. Another movie that I think people will recognize as being very similar is Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is definitely a gothic horror that has a lot in common with these stories, where it is like a nice girl who's spirited or whatever gets marries a gothic man and moves into his gothic house, and there's depraved gothic mysteries to deal with. And that one's like literally a horror movie. There's ghosts, so it's like they take it, but obviously in that situation the ghosts are metaphors for the sins of the past, which are incest and isolation and the consequences of the dwindling aristocracy in the face of the bourgeois revolution. So that's like where a lot of that stuff goes in. So that if you're leaving film noir and you're wanting to go into gothic melodrama, Rebecca and Crimson Peak are really fun. If you're wanting to stay in the noir tradition, then The Secret Beyond the Door is a Fritz Lang movie where Joan Bennett marries a psychiatrist and moves into his house, and he has all these rooms in his house that he's designed like almost like a diorama of murder rooms where like a famous murder took place, and so he designs the room with like the scary chair and the noose or whatever, and it's like these these places where these murders have taken place, and she starts to find this very sinister and find all these weird clues and start kind of investigating it in his big creepy house.
That sounds great.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
I got to see it in the theater many years ago at the BAM PFA in Berkeley. It's the theater and museum. I highly recommend. It's amazing, and they
Love
do these
Fritz
great
Lang.
series. Yes, I'm obsessed with Fritz Lang, the noir father, Fritz Lang, who did so much great German Expressionism. M is a great movie.
Scarlet Street.
Oh my God, Scarlet Street, The Big
one.
Heat. He did so many. I love his doors. He always has great doors.
Yeah.
Which
the
is
one
like
he did where it's like it's like they think that someone's a Nazi spy potentially, and it's like really it's got like the weirdest, most unsettling first half hour, but I can never remember
I can't remember.
He's done so many good ones.
He's done so many good ones.
Rancho Notorious too.
Yeah,
that's one I recently
yeah,
I recently got.
So good.
Ministry of Fear, that's the one. Yeah, that's a great one.
Thank you. Ministry of Fear, yeah, that's also one of my faves. Really, really excellent movie. But yeah, The Secret Beyond the Door is a great one with that. To the theme, the film noir theme of the gothic heroine going to a gothic storyline, but there's this psychological undercurrent. Psychiatry and mentalism are also huge themes in film noir. I'm going to give you recs that are more toward that in just a second, just because I think it's fun. But the other movie that I really want to recommend is a little bit more obscure. It's a Robert Wise movie called The House on Telegraph Hill.
Robert Wise directed. I love Robert Wise.
Yes, Robert Wise directed The House.
Did he do Odds Against Tomorrow as well?
Yeah, he did a bunch of great movies. He did West Side Story, Sound of Music. He did. He edited Citizen Kane. Like, he's amazing. But
have you seen Odds Against Tomorrow?
Yeah.
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 First film noir for the audience out there. First film noir. Generally, it's this one or I can't remember. I can never remember the name of the other one, but I think this one was the first film noir to have a black protagonist.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And yeah, he was tremendous. Basically in the saddle. I actually just bought the soundtrack on vinyl. I couldn't believe it. I found it on
great soundtrack.
I found it online for $12. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" It's an insane deal. Because yeah, it's an insanely good soundtrack, and Harry Belafonte is amazing in it. And Robert Ryan showing up to be a racist. He was always playing a racist.
Yeah.
And I don't know why.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he was racist in real life, but he got typecast doing that. But yeah, Odds Against Tomorrow, man, what an incredible film. But
Richard Widmark, neither. The other movie he did, I think, the same year as Night in the City, one of the best years for an actor. He did No Way Out, where he plays a racist criminal for the audience. And he felt so bad about it, he kept apologizing to Sidney Poitier in between takes.
Which is actually like another little example of white fragility. So for all you white people out there, if you like have to act in a movie where you're being a racist, don't keep apologizing to your black co-stars. Like they don't, like, they're actors, they're professionals. They know that you're not, you don't have to keep apologizing to them. That's you dealing with your white guilt. So that was Richard Widmark giving into his white guilt. That movie has a lot of like white guilt, white liberal anti-racism issues with it, but I'm obsessed with it. During COVID, I did for friends, when COVID first dropped, I did some movie nights, and I did like opening remarks and I did one for No Way Out and was like really obsessed with that movie. It's so good. Yeah. And Richard Widmark getting to just like be a crazy guy. Like he was so good at that. He was so good at being mad. He was in actually in another movie being totally mad with Cornel Wilde and Ida Lupino called Roadhouse. And he starts out okay and then just goes nuts. And he was so good at that. He was so good at being nuts. And he really brought that to Night in the City. But to bring it back to another movie, I don't know how much you got of my audio on this, but I'm going to...
Real quickly before we go, because we also, because we shouted first film noir with the black protagonist, Ida Lupino, I believe, was the first woman to direct a film noir.
Hitchhiker.
She didn't direct, Roadhouse, but shout out Ida Lupino. Who's a great director.
Yeah, she did this other movie too, Outrage, that I think of as a film noir, but it's mostly considered a women's picture, and it's about a woman like coming to terms with being raped. I think it's very much a film noir because it is about the psychological impact of rape, but it's not counted. But The Hitchhiker is definitely a film noir, and yeah, she was the first one to do it. Cinematography by Nicholas Musaraka, who is my girlfriend, and he's the guy who really defined the visual conventions of film noir cinematography in Stranger on the Third Floor, which I mentioned, which many people consider the first true film noir, like the first true Hollywood noir. So I'll recommend that, but I just want to make sure that I really do shout out House on Telegraph Hill and Valentina Cortez as being like, she basically is a woman who was in a concentration camp, and she met another woman who was weaker, and like one of the ways that this character made it through the concentration camp was keeping her friend alive and like protecting her friend. And then her friend dies, and it turns out that she has a son who's being taken care of by her rich aunt in the United States. And so the character, God, what is her name? Victoria. What she does is sort of like at the last second, like she was the one who held on to both of their passports and all of their stuff because she was protecting her friend because she was sickly. And then when the concentration camp gets liberated and she's meeting with the American liberators, she sort of at the last second takes on her friend's identity so that she could go take care of her son, her little son. She decides to pretend to be her and pretend to be mom so that she could go take care of the boy. And like, when she comes back, the young boy, he has a guardian, whose name is Alan, actually. And so the guardian is kind of fulfilling the role of the man who's bringing her into the scary San Francisco mansion, the house on Telegraph Hill, because the aunt has passed. She's dead. And so the son, the little boy, is the heir. He's the one who's going to inherit eventually all of this. So this guy who's taking care of him, obviously, obviously he's going to be suspect. This guy is going to be suspicious. And so Victoria is dealing with that, of trying to take care of this, trying to be a mother to a son who's not hers, and like assume this role of this woman, and then also like secure this guy who's the guardian to make sure things are safe. And then things start to get spooky and mysterious and potentially dangerous. And my novel is set in San Francisco, and I love San Francisco as a noir city. So this one is set in San Francisco, and you get a lot of good footage of San Francisco. Undercurrent also has some. They spent some time in San Francisco, and that's a good time. But I think that House on Telegraph Hill is incredible and a really good option if you liked Undercurrent. So those would be my recommendations for those movies. Sweet.
I'd love to see them. Yeah, I just thought of too, as you were lesser known ones, because I was thinking of as you were it reminded me of one also because I'm wearing the Casablanca shirt, but the Jonah Paris. If you haven't seen Jonah Paris with Paul Henreid, I don't know if you've seen that one with
yes.
with Lori Krieger as well. Okay, yeah, that's one of the least watched movies on Letterboxd.
Yeah,
364 loggings, and it's one of the best. It's shot by, I mean, you said Nicholas Musaraka, your girlfriend, my boyfriend, Russell Meddy, who famous for the Douglas Sirk melodramas.
Yeah.
He gets to rock his socks off in black and white, and it's great. It's basically Casablanca, but in Paris, and just beautiful cinematography. The other one would be, I think, one of the least ones. There's only 51 people, To the Victor by Delmer Daves, which is very hard to find. But it was surprisingly good. 1948 Delmer Daves. Also, you could, if you haven't seen The Red House, I don't know, his 1947 one with Edward G. Robinson. That I'd be curious if you think that's a film noir or not, because that is
I have to watch
It's
it again.
it's almost a neo noir. It's like Blue Velvet before Blue Velvet. It's like a Lynchian thing where Edward G is trying not to trying to think I can say this PG-13. He's trying not to have sex with his adopted daughter for the entire movie, and it's grotesque to watch. One of the most grotesque things. And Delmer Daves has horrible vibes as a director. I mean, he's a tremendous director, but is just rotten, uncomfortable, hair-raising vibes in every family thing he ever does, in a strange way. But yeah, those would be. So we got a good list. Gollum, Murder My Sweet Lady in the Lake, Crimson Peak, House on Telegraph Hill, Outrage, Stranger on the Third Floor, Secret Beyond the Door. Yeah, I need to watch all those. I saw Lady in the Lake on Criterion a couple months ago, but I didn't check it out. But there's another. Delmer Daves also did that first person one you've probably seen with Bogart, Dark Passage, which I think is the other
it's another San Francisco noir. That's one of my favorites. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. And plastic surgery is a huge theme in film noir. It's a big time one. A Woman's Face is Joan Crawford is another one. There's a lot like plastic surgery, like, you know, because identity is such a huge theme in film noir. So changing your face is like a big part of it. And actually, this is so funny. I'm really delighted that this gives me a segue to talk about something slightly related to Night in the City. The fact that Harry Fabian is an artist without an art. It's like he makes me think of Ed Wood. Like Ed Wood was very much an auteur in his heart, an artist in his heart. But he just like didn't really have the talent or the patience. Like that is one of the greatest crises that Harry Fabian deals with, is a total lack of patience. He wants instant gratification, instant success. He's unwilling to grind. He's unwilling to work really hard. And like that is an unfortunate sort of consequence of neoliberalism. And we're seeing that right now. Like we're seeing liberals in America just desperately trying to find a quick solution to the fascist crisis that we're in, instead of understanding that it's like the fascists have won the national game, which means that we have to do long-term, grueling, daily work in order to build the foundation and organize the working class enough to actually turn the tide and fight back. And so it's like that labor, like, you know, under neoliberalism, like the idea is ease and plenty, trying to find the quick way. We're not raised to have a good work ethic, you know, so we want to have the quick solution, the quick result. And like that was Ed Wood's crisis, is that he was in such a hurry and he would cut corners because he just wasn't really willing to do the hard work. And yet he made a film noir called Jailbait. It's a piece of crap, but it has the theme of plastic surgery in it, which I think is so appropriate for Ed Wood, who was, you know, had so much complexity around his identity, right, with his transvestism and his empathy for people with non-binary and non-traditional heteronormative genders, right? Like when you watch Glenn or Glenda, excluding all the weird filler footage, it's like it's such an empathetic, sympathetic portrait of people who exist outside of the gender binary, of the patriarchal gender binary. And so it's like, in a way, very perfect that he would have made a film noir. So yeah, I just want to throw that out there when you were mentioning Dark Passage, because it's, you know, it's one of those connections, you know, and the way that these things all connect. And I just think so. Film noir is so much fun for me because of the connections. It'll make you watch movies that you would have never thought. Like why would I watch Jailbait? You know, or like, why would I, you know, how would these movies make it across my table? How would they make it into my database? And it's because film noir is this beautiful umbrella and has all of these components. You know, it's like a really beautifully set table, you know, or like a buffet almost. Like you have this big buffet and you make your own plate. You know, you make a plate of all these elements, and that's your film noir. And it's just so much fun and so beautiful. I love it.
I love it. Yeah, it's tremendous. One of my favorite genres. It always makes me. I'm hoping I'm gonna try and give it a comeback. But you know, just the nature of class consciousness relating to it. Every time I see one of these movies, it's just like, oh, that could be this, that could be this. Like, you know, Harry Fabian is a striver. He is, you know, he is so many people I've met today, and you could say that for so many of these movies. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on. This is super fun. Audience, if you want more above the Film Noir database and all these, go to StephanieEdd.com. That's StephanieEdd.com. And thank you so much for coming on. Any final things you want to say to the audience, or?
Yeah, if you go to my website and you go to the entry for the Film Noir database, I'm going to ask you to please click the link there and sign up for Airtable with just a throwaway email. That's how you get access to the database. But it also helps me to maintain the database, because every person who signs up for Airtable through me, I get a $10 credit. And it's because of the accumulated $10 credits from all of you lovely people who signed up for my database that I was able to pay for a next level package on Airtable. And because I was able to pay for a new package, I got to add an entire new board for cinematographers. So now all of the entries have a list for cinematographer, so that you can go to that tab and you could be like, I want to see all the movies in this database that Nicholas Musaraka did, right? And so I was really excited about that I got to add in all those new records. And all the records have letterboxed links now too as well. So please go to my website. I would really love that. I want to start sending out more newsletters. So I promise I won't spam you, but please sign up for my database and my newsletter. And I hope I see you all out there. Let's talk about film noir and organizing the working class. And because when we organize, we win.
Yeah, you will not be able to you will be convinced of. Stephanie and I talked a lot of political leadings, a lot of political stuff today. The more film noirs if you want to get someone into socialism, honestly, show them about 15 film noirs and it'd be like, oh, okay, these accurately explain just about everything. Honestly, that might be, that would be my request as a fan. I saw she also has as like a Star Trek, like guide to getting into Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like, guide to getting into socialism via film noir. And, you could probably put like this. I would put Try and Get Me, He Ran All the Way, any of the Film Grease stuff.
Yeah. Actually, if you go to my database, I also have some playlists in one of the tabs. There's like collections for certain things. And they're mostly for my books that I'm writing. Like, I do have the list from Noirvember when I released my book, all the videos that I made, all those movies are in that list. So if you go to Noirvember, that can be a thing where you watch a movie almost every single day in November. And then I also have a playlist for the book that I released, The Clear Case. But then there are also 2 entries for a book that I've been writing called The Hard Left, which is a leftist sort of film noir, where it's like all the characters in my mind are played by classic noir characters. And it's basically about a radical leftist journalist who from San Francisco who finally gets ousted and blacklisted from her community in San Francisco. So she ends up moving to a new city because she gets hired by this small organization of people who live in a black neighborhood that's being threatened by these political moguls who want to, destroy the neighborhood using redlining, using those tactics that have been used historically to destroy black neighborhoods and build parks and highways and things. And so they're trying to fight back against these moguls, and they get this idea from like the local Marxists basically to hire this woman to be like an investigator and agitator. So she shows up and looks into it and is helping them investigate things and figure out a way to attack these moguls directly in order to save the neighborhood. So that book is like long in progress. I don't know if it'll ever happen. I'd love it to be an animated movie, actually. But it has a playlist. So if you want to get someone into film noir, like a big, like that playlist will give you a lot of movies. And then the top one also is a link for the book that I'm really working on now called Criminal Interest, which is about a black woman in 1948 San Francisco, Marion Kane, who starts out the book trying to handle her own caper, trying to escape her own caper. And while she's doing that, she goes to the bank, and then the bank gets taken over by robbers and she gets taken hostage. So she's trying to like escape her own caper, and then now she's trapped. And she's like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this banking situation. And then if I get out of this hostage situation, how do I get out of my own caper? So there's a lot that has to do around leftism, and it's a Marxist novel that's hoping to be, that's very intersectional. So the playlist that I have in the database for that is shorter, and that will definitely be a good list. Odds Against Tomorrow is on that list, and so is No Way Out, along with The Long Night, Out of the Past, The Dark Past, Sorry Wrong Number, and Raw Deal. So, those movies, like, I think those are also some good movies to get into if you want to kind of get people into socialism. But really, I mean, the whole database, because I'm a Marxist, is geared toward that.
Yeah.
You know, and like I leave notes and comments in some of these, so you know, some of them even have like my original viewing notes that I was taking the first time I ever saw them. So there's cool stuff in this database. And I'm always continuously adding to it nonstop, always. So it's just going to keep growing. And I always love recommendations, you know, for people out there who have, you know, leftist film noir or noir adjacent, you know, that can always lead us to places. So I haven't been making a ton of content on this for TikTok lately because I've been writing criminal interests. So that's one of those things where it's just like, Stephanie hasn't been posting in a while. Where is she? She just occasionally pops up and posts something political or something weird. Like, what is she doing? And it's like, she's writing. She's just, she's pounding the keys. That's what she's doing. So excuse me for speaking in the third person.
No, not at all. Yeah, that the second to last book that you mentioned, Final Rec, I guess, would be because it sounded like some Robert Moses stuff. Famous, the Power Broker in New York City, famous book about him by Robert Caro. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, especially because you said animated. Yeah,
yep.
It's like the best movie about gentrification, I think. Yeah. One of the better ones I've seen. I haven't seen too many movies about it, but yeah, that's,
they want to destroy a town occupied by racial minorities in order to build a freeway, and they're doing it also by destroying public transportation. It's like, that's real deal, and that's in the database. Yeah. That's in the database. It's like, people be like, that's not a film noir, it's a comedy, and it's like, no, it's a film noir, like, because it's also about, like, you know, societal oppression and capitalism and, like, you know, grief and identity and how you relate to other people and you know, antisocial behavior and greed. You know, it's like I constantly go back to dragon sickness. So like, dragon sickness is a huge theme in film noir, where like, you know, it happens to even good people. Like, that's why I really like to reference Black Friday as showing you the transition, you know, because like that's what shifts that movie into just being pure science fiction horror into just skirting the line of film noir, is because this guy has this dragon sickness and there's this crisis of identity. So it's like, it's a transitional film, and then just after that, Stranger on the Floor came out. Third Floor came out. So it's like, I'm probably in October going to talk about Black Friday a bunch. So you guys can look forward to that in a couple of months. I'm hoping October I'll get to do some more kind of like showing you how film noir like came out of horror in a lot of ways, and it's like, it's this evolution, this twist out of it, and then hopefully in November we'll celebrate Noirvember. We'll do some fun stuff. Yeah,
that sounds good. Yeah, I might do a Noirvember as well. Might do some stuff for that. That'd be fun. Give me a reason to watch a lot of these movies you recommended, which I'd love to.
Heck yeah.
And then also check out the list. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much. This has been super fun.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
I love talking noir. Anytime. We'll see you, everyone.